afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. Come on in. Please take a second and grab a good seat up front. Hope you're in a good, comfortable position and safe space to engage with us with some debate and discussion. This is the Hot Mic Podcast. I'm Nathan Ivy, your humble host, and welcome back. As always, I am not alone. I want to introduce our panel of esteemed. Okay, see somebody's getting ahead of us. We got a phone call. That's cool. But want to just welcome everybody into the show. Today we got Raven Mundy with us. Hey, what's up, Raven? How are you?
I'm good, and you?
Good to see you. Good to see you. And Phil Heimlich, how you doing, Phil? Whoa. Hey, Phil. Uh-oh. I think we need the
He's having a
Heimlich
Mitch McConnell
maneuver.
moment.
Yeah. Hey, Phil, unplug and come back, man. And as always, Kevin Aldridge, what's up, man? How you doing, bro?
What's up, man? Good to be with the crew.
Absolutely.
Fellas, I gotta come. If you don't mind, let me come off and go. I don't have my battery's about to go dead on this computer. I got to switch computers, so I'll be right.
All right, do what you got to do. Do what you got to do. Hey, Phil, Hey, Phil, just a message from me to you. You are frozen, man. I'm not sure what you might want to unplug and then come back in and then join the conversation. All right. Message to Phil Heimlich if he can hear us. Hopefully he can. But and Tarris said he'll jump back in. But let's jump straight back into it. You know, lots of stuff to talk about. We got to start talking with a conversation about the Super Bowl and not just the game itself, but what happened at halftime. I don't know about you, but I've heard everything. I've heard people say it was the best ever. I've heard people say it's the worst ever. I've heard people say it was the blackest ever. I've heard black people say it was a worthless performance, right? I want to know what you thought about Kendrick Lamar's halftime performance.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I mean, it the greatest Super Bowl performance of all time. Look, let's slow our roll on that. I mean, when you've had, iconic artists like, Prince and Beyonce and some others who certainly have had much better performances, far better stagecraft. I think it was a good performance. I mean, I thought there was creativity there. I mean, I think a lot of the hidden messages that, or not so hidden messages that Kendrick had in the performance were always interesting. I think that's always interesting to kind of try to look and see what messages are being sent beyond what is obvious at first glance. And a lot of that is hard to take in, as you're watching it. So thank God for all of those people on YouTube and the internet who take the time to parse every scene in detail to kind of explain it to those of us who can't catch it in the moment. But no, I didn't have a problem with it. I didn't think it was the best. I didn't think it was the worst. I thought it was a good performance. I enjoyed it, and I'm sure we'll get into talking about maybe some of the messaging there on down the road. But that was my initial thought.
I loved it. I'm a big Kendrick fan, and what I've grown to, what I've learned about his artistry is that you have to he's the kind of artist that you kind of have to take in his art multiple times for you to really get the full effect of it. And I think that the Super Bowl performance was just another example of that. Like, I remember I was with my family watching the Super Bowl, and we went absolutely insane. When he played, not when he finally did Not Like Us, because he teased it throughout the performance and he led up to it. But that was kind of the song that most people were excited about. My family went crazy, of course. But there were also other songs that we also thoroughly enjoyed as well from his newest album, G and X. He also did some other older songs from some of his other albums. A lot of the criticism that I saw was people saying, "Well, why didn't he do more of his, more widely known hits?" And I think that it just it I agree with Kevin. It wasn't the best performance we've ever seen from the Super Bowl, but I think that it wasn't necessarily supposed to be. I think that it was entertaining enough to be entertainment, but I do think that the overall purpose of it was messaging. And like I said, he's the kind of artist where you have to take in his art multiple times and really comb through it with a fine tooth comb to really get the point of it. Um, and I'm not mad at that at all because it gives those of us who enjoy doing that a chance to do so. And so I loved it. I think that he really did a great job of weaving in a lot of symbolism and things that wouldn't be obvious from jump, but also some very obvious things. I think the uh, the portion of the program where he had Samuel L. Jackson play Uncle Sam and kind of give certain commentaries throughout the performance was amazing. And I know that people might not have caught it, the impact of it, but if you were listening to his commentary, it was very much so a protest. It was very much so what is it performance art. And so I think that it's going to be something that people will have to go back and look at multiple times until they get the full understanding of what he was trying to do. It wasn't just entertainment, and so if you were only looking for entertainment purposes, you're going to be disappointed. But I think that if you're familiar with the kind of artist that Kendrick is, you kind of get the point that he was making. And I think that it'll be interesting to see how people truly get an understanding for what it is he actually did on that stage as time progresses. I've seen so many different think pieces on what people actually think different things mean, and I just think that that portion of it is what makes it art. If you can create a piece of art that makes people think, you've done your job. And so I think that he did a great job.
And I would say, just to piggyback on what Raven said, I think that depending on how you look at it in terms of what you're saying is the best performance versus the worst performance, I think Kendrick's performance by far was the most thoughtful, if you want to say that, in terms of trying to send a message and maybe speak to the political times that we're in, while also getting a few digs in on Drake. So, I mean, it was,
Yeah.
if you're looking at it through that lens, then I might agree with the people that say it's the best. It was probably definitely the most socially conscious performance that we've seen in terms of trying to make a statement through the art and then leaving it open to the interpretation of the viewers. You don't get that from some of the typical halftime performances that we see, which, as Raven pointed out, which are exclusively about sort of the entertainment, the song and dance element of it. That wasn't what Kendrick was primarily trying to do, I think, in his performance at halftime. So if you're looking at it from that lens, then I might change my statement a little bit to say, yeah, it might be one of the most impactful performances from that standpoint.
Mhm.
I like the Kendrick being an artist and then being a Gemini. Kendrick, it was amazing. That was probably the best I've ever seen. And I'm looking at it from a lens. My favorite before that was Chris Stapleton and Justin Timberlake, "Can't Drink You Away" at the CMAs. So nobody can't say it's from a cultural lens, because that was just an amazing performance. But when you break it down, like Raven was saying, I've watched the thing probably 30 times and I've done a reaction video on it. I can't wait to release it. It's just so, and it's something that I can use as a tool whenever I'm out and about amongst white America too, because they might not get it, but their kids do. And I can have a conversation. How pissed off would some dude be to where like, oh, that was sucked. That sucked. That was horrible. But then you talk to their kid, you're like, oh, you see that not like us? And then me and their kid and me or their grandkid can vibe on when they are so stuck in their ways. But then I can vibe with their grandkids and on a cultural thing. And then whenever I start breaking it down to them, I'm like, see, this is exactly what he was talking about when Samuel L. Jackson was talking about, oh, hold up, you're being too ghetto. And he had to be too humble. Sit down. Be humble. Man, hands down, I believe this thing is going to go down in history as the best performance in history. It's like, as soon as the white people get on it, and they're going to treat it like Hamilton. They're like, oh, have you seen Hamilton? How they were all woke on Hamilton and stuff like that. This is a more cultural, this brings it from the Hamilton, the 1800s, whatever, to more cultural days. Hands up, Kendrick, he's the king, man.
I also want to add that I think that people were getting lost, because I made a post after the performance, and some people responded to my post, but I think that people were to me it exposed the very great divide between people who only listen to music and who only respect artists when they are simply being entertainment versus when they actually do have a message. There were a lot of people who watched this performance who only wanted entertainment. I don't want to watch the Super Bowl and be taught something. I just want to be entertained. And I think that it exposed a lot of that mindset after the fact. And I think that a lot of people did get simply caught up in what they under the very small understanding that they have about the actual beef between him and Drake. Because if you're somebody who actually has like I said, if you enjoy the kind of art that he produces, which is always multi-layered, he's always been a multi-layered artist from his inception into the music industry. You know that even the beef was bigger than Drake. It was never just about Drake. It was a larger social commentary, and Drake was just the foot in the door to have the conversation because he started the beef. And so when you look at it from that standpoint and you understand that this was never just about Drake, you don't get so easily distracted about him doing the diss song that he just won a Grammy for. It's bigger than that. It's always been bigger than Drake. And I think that those of us who understood that, we probably enjoyed it the most because we understood that, yeah, he did not like us, and it's a diss song, and it's some stuff he said about Drake in the song, but really, it was more so him using Drake as an example of a greater conversation that we should be having about hip hop, or the culture, Black culture in general. There are people who take part in our culture who have no real stake in it, who give no real contributions to the culture, who set up shop to make money off of our culture and don't give anything back to it. They use us as entertainment because they cannot stomach our struggle. That is the conversation of this beef between Drake and Kendrick, and it don't just end at a song. It's actual. It's an actual call to action, is what it is, and I think that different people's reaction to it just kind of gave me a glimpse of how people truly only they stop at that surface level of entertainment only, and they don't really truly think about music as, or hip hop even as art, as the art form as it is. Art Hip hop has always been a social commentary. It's always been a conversation about what Black people go through in this country since the beginning of it. And I think that we have now got a firsthand glimpse of the fact that we have been removed from that idea for a couple generations now. And I love that Kendrick is forcing us to really think about it again. I remember having conversations with my uncles about why they love the version of hip hop that they grew up with, where to me it's so simple. It's one to the two to the three to the flight. That don't connect with me the same as a Kendrick does. But there's reasoning behind that. And I think that what I love is that Kendrick is reopening that conversation. Hip hop has never just been entertainment. It only became entertainment when white folks monetized it, and that's it. But it's always been a social commentary. So if you enjoy social commentary, I think that you truly do enjoy something like this.
If you can go back to the first time you heard NWA and Eazy-E back in the day, when you first heard that, when you first got that Eazy-E tape, Eazy Does It, and they started coming back to F the police, F the police. That was social commentary, what Raven was saying. Social commentary, what was going on in LA at that time. We didn't have the internet. All we had was hip hop. It was communication from our streets, from our people, art form that only we were able to decode and decipher. So if we can get back there and we can start dropping subliminals and we can get how we were marching and using that flag and that symbolism of we were America, I'll be telling these a lot of white people, my great-grandmother and great-great-grandparents were born here, not immigrated here in the 20s. So we got so much stake in this game. So when people are like, oh, we're the white people, and that our blood is in this country just as much as anybody else's. So that was a lot of symbolism that I seen too. So I'm going to drop that in there too.
Yeah, I think Raven is hit on to something, and this is what we always run into when you run into big events like the Super Bowl or quite frankly any sporting event. A vast majority of people who tune into it to escape a lot of the things that Kendrick Lamar talked about and was trying to point out. So a lot of times sporting events, the Super Bowl halftime show, all of that stuff people look at as an escape from the politics. And a lot of people will say, hey, man, I just want to watch the game, or I just want to watch entertainment at halftime. I don't want a sermon. I don't want a political statement. That's not what I tuned in to watch. So I think a lot of people who might be reacting negatively to the performance are coming at it from that lens that we often see. I mean, when Tim Tebow was the hit thing, and when he was kneeling down and he was doing his kiss to Jesus or whatever it was he was doing, I remember that people were offended by that. They felt like they didn't want him proselytizing to him every time he was in the game, because everything that Tim Tebow said after he would do something good was something about God. So there's something about these larger world issues that people don't like mixing in with their sport. But one thing that has always been true of our culture is we've used those platforms as an opportunity to talk about social injustices, because you have such a large platform. that it's been our history as a culture that it's on those biggest stages that conscientious athletes and artists have used them to make political, cultural, societal statements. And in a day and time where I have a lot of criticism of today's hip hop music in terms of, I don't really think there are a lot of artists out there that are talking about much. And I think that that's why Kendrick Lamar is at the top of the game, because he is a throwback to the type of hip hop artist that ain't just talking about money, women, how many women they can bed, and all of this other nonsense that's out there that's maybe not necessarily good for the culture, but people who are actually out there. I mean, think about the hip hop artists we revere. They are the ones who had something to say. You know, the Tupacs of the world. You mentioned the NWAs, the Public Enemies, the artists who we look at as being socially conscious. They're the ones that we remember. The one-hit wonders, yeah, they might be around, might be something to bob your head to, but they're not talking about anything. And I think that, you know, that's where Kendrick sets himself apart from many.
You want to jump in there, Phil?
Well, I don't know if "jump in" is the right term. I think I think there's one thing that you'd all agree with about me. I have no taste, okay, but I know it, okay. So you know, when it comes to art or music or clothing, I'm wearing warm ups. Does that answer that prove my point? I mean, I'm not someone I think you really want to tap into for commentary on those kind of things.
You know, I love your honesty, man. I appreciate it. All right, well, just sit
Well,
this
can
one out
I?
for a second. No, Raven's got a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just gonna ask Phil. Like, did you watch the performance and did it make you feel anything?
Well, I didn't. I mentioned before, I'm not too much of a pro football fan, so I
Okay.
didn't watch the game. I'm into college football, college basketball, but I did watch the halftime thing because I knew we were going to be talking about it. You know, to be honest with you, part of it is I'm not familiar with the music. To be honest, it didn't either offend me or cause me to really enjoy it. I was kind of neutral, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
Well, you know, I'm right there with you, Phil, because I didn't watch the Super Bowl either. I kind of talked about this last Friday. And you know what, America? I'm just fine. Like, you can actually not watch the Super Bowl, and guess what? Life goes on, right? I just watched everything afterwards, so I got a chance to watch the little snippets at first, and then I watched the halftime show in its entirety. They put this stuff on YouTube, so I watched it, and I didn't have to deal with anything at all. And I'm glad I did. And sidebar, before I get into my flow about Kendrick, is I am so happy that Philadelphia won. Because at first
Same.
I didn't really have a dog in the race. But when I saw an interview with Donald Trump and he said he was in favor and rooting for Kansas City, I automatically was with Philadelphia. Go Eagles. I loved them. Them brothers put it down on them. I loved it.
It was a wipeout.
It was a wipeout. It was the best blowout ever. And I didn't get a chance to enjoy it in real time. I enjoyed it afterward. It was beautiful. I loved it. And I read that Donald Trump left early, pouting, got back on Air Force One, or Donald Trump Force One, whatever he's calling it these days. You know, he's the new king. So I was very pleased at the outcome. But in terms of Kendrick, you all guys, all of y'all said great stuff. I mean, I agree with a lot of what everybody said, including Phil, right? And
Thank you.
because I didn't watch it. And the only thing I would add to it is, you know, okay, what now? So yeah, you know, Kendrick is multi-layered. He may just he can't be the artist and the activist and lead the charge too. So if his art is meant to touch people and make them aware about what's happening in society and in politics, the onus now is on us. So for all the people that got it, because most people didn't, a lot of people didn't get it. For all the people who understood the symbolism and they cared enough to go back and watch the videos and they break it all down, and you're like, oh, he was making a point about politics, or oh, he was making a point about America trying to tell a black man not to speak his piece. Oh, he was talking about the divided America. What are you going to do with it? You know what I'm saying? The artist did his job. Now, what are the people going to do? So he had this great moment. It was great. It was the blackest performance ever, the Super Bowl. Now what? So that's my issue. It's on us now to pick up with that energy and do something with it, right? Whether it's
Absolutely.
focus on the midterms or focus on, you know, where you live, to build something where you actually live in your locale, but do something with that energy. That's what I would say. But in
I
terms of
agree.
rating it, that's completely subjective. Like one person might say it's Beyonce, somebody might say it's somebody else. It's up to you. But I thought it was entertaining, and I thought we got the best out of Kendrick that he could possibly give us, right? Considering who he is and the kind of music he produces and the times that we're in, I think that was the best that he could give us. And I think I give him props for that. I give him props for it.
I agree. It's something that you learn very quickly when you work professionally in media, which is, in my opinion, when you work in media, you also work in entertainment because they intersect. It's something that you learn very quickly. You can't do everything. You have to find your niche. You have to find your part in whatever movement that you believe that you believe in, and you have to play your part. I think Kendrick did his part. He is an artist, and so he uses his music to present us with messages and present us with ideas, and then us as the consumer of his art, we have to then make a decision personally what we're going to do about it. And I think that a lot of things, including some of the things that we'll be talking about today, are is the response to his art. It is us now that we know it's that phrase, if you know better you do better. So now that we know, now that we've understood the messaging, what are we prepared to do in order to respond to the issues that he shed a light on, that he put a spotlight on? He took a Super Bowl stage, probably the biggest stage in America, and he presented the American people with messaging, and now it is our turn to take that messaging and turn it into action. So I completely agree with your sentiments.
Yeah, and action can be one of those things, because I think one of the things that people find themselves in is they want to do something but they don't know what to do. Right? It's like, some of these issues that we talk about are so big. They're national issues, they're state issues, in some cases they're world issues, and people become paralyzed by this notion of, hey, I'm just one person. I'm just, what can I possibly do? So I think that sometimes the inaction that we see, that we mistake for apathy or laziness, is sometimes just people are frozen because they don't know what to do. And what I always encourage people to do is try to channel their inner superpower. Look, we all have one. We just have to figure out what that is. We all have a voice that we can lift up, for sure, but not everybody is good with that. Not everybody's articulate. Not everybody has the words. For me, a lot of times that's my superpower. I can speak, I can write. I try to use those to the best of my ability to speak on the issues. So I think people have to figure out, what is your superpower? What do you do well? What is your lane? And go do it in that lane. Do it with the people that you have influence with. Look, you're not going to get on any social media channel and by your comment your singular comment change the perspective of the world, but you can, maybe through conversations, influence the people who are in your circle. So I think what each of us have to do is not think too big. Think about what you can control. Think about who you can influence, and think about what skills and abilities that you have that you can use and put that to action. And I think that's where you got to start. And if you start there, if all of us start there with our little 1%, that adds up over time.
That's
The other thought I had one more other thought. And I don't know, people might say this is cynical or whatever. They can think what they think. But after I watched it a couple times, I was looking at how people was reacting to it. And I thought, damn, things just don't change, right? Like the more things change, the more they stay the same. Like during the time of enslavement, you had black people that was doing in performances on Master's plantation with subliminal messages to each other. And flash forward, we're doing the same thing. It's the same thing on some levels. I'm like, when do we get out of these 6 cycles and actually move to a better place? Just my thought. You ain't got to agree, but I definitely can see a symmetry between the way we're reacting to what we want to call it Donald Trump or, neo-Nazi racism on the rise, and how we're dealing with it. It's very similar to what I've read happened during enslavement, but it could just be me. Could just be me.
Can you expound on that a little bit, Nathan, so I can make sure I'm following what you mean by that?
I've read that during enslavement, there were a lot of subliminal messages in the things that enslaved people were doing. They had to do that because they were living on the plantation, basically living in oppression, and they couldn't say things out loud, so they would do it subliminally. Even in terms of the way we would used to braid our hair back in the day. And I'm like, wow, you know, performance, messages, masses, plantation. Flash forward, we just did this. We just saw the same thing with Kendrick. Performance, subliminal messages, masses, plantation, the NFL. Right. This is how my brain works. Right. So I'm seeing this symmetry. I'm like, they asking myself, like, wow, we're doing the same things we've been doing on some levels. Right. And again, wondering when do we break these cycles and get to a new paradigm. I'm sick of seeing it. I'm tired of subliminals. I want to be out loud and be who we are. Period. But you know, it's the world we live in. I get it. I
Well,
understand.
I think you can be that, and I think you do see that. But I think the reality of what we see, and you see this across the board on any side of an issue, that there's this thing that we all have that says freedom of speech. So Kendrick Lamar could have been, you know, a whole lot more overt in terms of his messaging and things that he did during the performance. He absolutely could have done that.
But there's a consequence to it, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's a
Right.
consequence that goes along with freedom of speech, and if you're willing to pay that price, and some people are, and some people aren't, then you bull forward, and that's that's where we are, and that's regardless of what side of this argument that you're on, because we see it where if somebody on the right comes out and they take a bold stance, hey man, people gonna rally against them. They're gonna find out where you work. They're gonna call your job. They're gonna put the pressure on you for what it is that you say, the position that you take. They're not gonna shop at your store. They're not gonna do this, that, or the other. They're gonna use their right to punish you, so to speak, in whatever way they deem appropriate for the stance that you take that they don't agree with.
I also think that because I saw somebody's comment in the Facebook in the chat where they said, well, I didn't really learn anything new. I want to say that you didn't learn anything new, but we have constant conversation about the fact that not all of us are as aware or as knowledgeable about some of the things that we go through as a people as the rest of us. I've said this very openly. I didn't really get involved or be understanding of politics until I started working at the Buzz, because those were not conversations that I was having with my peers. I had to get around my elders for an extended period of time to really understand what the state of Black America is. Because if I had never, taken part in those conversations, I would never know how far behind we actually are. I've said this before as well. I didn't know that police brutality was a thing in America until Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown. I was in high school and in college when those two situations happened. And seeing somebody my age be a victim of police brutality or be a victim of, white supremacist vigilante justice, it was a new concept to me. I had to then educate myself if I really wanted to understand about those things. And so while we see things like this, like these subliminal, messaging or whatever, or these things that happen on a world stage that send out messaging to the masses, we have to also understand that these things are not only for those of us who already know, they're also for those of us who have yet been made aware of the actual state of things, of the actual state of Black America. And so there is somebody who watched that performance, and then all on their timeline on Instagram and Facebook, they are now being educated because somebody else decided that because I know what this stuff means, I'm gonna break it down and let other people get educated in the process. We cannot always think that what we know and what we understand is a universal understanding. It's not. A lot of our people don't have the same understanding that you do. And so these kinds of things are still appropriate. They're still essential to educating the masses. It's the same feeling that people have about slavery movies. You hear people say all the time, I can't stand slavery movies. We don't need no more slavery movies. Well, actually, we kind of do, because there are some of us who don't actually know the real brunt of American slavery. There are some of us who still don't understand the impact of American slavery, and they need that information. And the best way to deliver that to those people is via entertainment. It's not always going to be in a book. It's not always going to be in a lecture. Sometimes it's a movie. Sometimes it's a Super Bowl performance. And so I just want to make that clear. We might not have got anything out of it, but somebody did. And that person still deserves to be educated in that way.
All right. Well, somebody brought up freedom of speech, and that offers a nice little segue. Is this freedom of speech right here? This is an image of the overpass, the 75 overpass in Lincoln Heights. This has become a national story. This band of what appears to be white men, I'm not on a limb when I say neo-Nazis because they're carrying various flags, which what appears to be a swastika on the side, uh, were basically run out of Lincoln Heights. Basically, this is an international story. Actually, I've seen it on international websites. People talking about this, and some people are saying that this is the same or connected with a very similar outfit of people who did something similar in downtown Columbus about 3 months ago. This has caused a huge conversation in which many Lincoln Heights residents have been calling out law enforcement, asking a lot of questions, including why weren't they arrested? But then some people might say this is freedom of speech.
Yeah,
What's your take on what happened in Lincoln Heights with the neo-Nazis?
it is absolutely freedom of speech, no matter how objectionable I may find it and others might find it. The reality is that everyone has the right to peaceable assembly. So as long as they are not violating any laws, are in some place where they're not supposed to be, which is like a public sidewalk or some sort of public place, there's really not much that law enforcement can or should be able to do. I wrote a piece a few years ago shortly after Charlottesville, and I think there was a group of people who were talking about coming to Cincinnati, and there were some who were like, well, the police shouldn't allow them to do that, or Cincinnati shouldn't let them. And I think I wrote a piece titled "You Can't Muzzle the Haters," basically in saying that when you get to that point where you want to begin to say who can and who can't march and protest, that's a slippery slope in terms of what someone finds to be objectionable speech. The First Amendment even protects hate speech. That unfortunately in our country, that's one of the byproducts of our constitutional rights, that even if someone says something hateful, they have a right to say it, in our Constitution. And there's nothing that the government can do to infringe upon that individual's rights. And so, as distasteful as we found it, they had their constitutional right to do that. Now, folks also had the constitutional right to do what they did, which is to meet them there and counter protest, which a lot of people did. And you saw what happened when folks started showing up. They got in a U-Haul truck and they got out of there. They showed themselves to be the cowards that they were, because when they were confronted by people who objected to what they were doing, they got out of there. And so, yes, now I think if people are looking around, and you got to be careful, because there's a lot of information floating around there that turns out not to be true. There were people who were saying they had open containers in their car and so forth and so on, and all of that stuff is looked into, and it turns out not to be the case. So I would just caution people to make sure that whatever you're hearing on social media or whatever, make sure that you got the facts and you got things verified and they're coming from, reliable, credible sources about, what actually took place at the scene, because, there's a lot of information that I've seen floating around that has turned out not to be true. And so we've got to understand that when First Amendment rights are protected, there's only so many things that law enforcement can do.
This reminded me of almost a yearly situation on city council. I don't know if you guys go back far enough, but these guys who the quote, the Klan always was always applying for a permit, and it could have been just 2 or 3 rednecks. I don't know who, but they were, quote, the Klan applying for a permit to do whatever on Fountain Square. And it was always a big debate in city council. And truthfully, just as Kevin said, we all, I think, knew it was free speech. Okay. But we continually voted 8-1 to ban it, because we were all, and I include myself, politically scared to vote in a way that was, quote, perceived as pro-Klan. The one guy who had the guts and the courage to vote against, to basically recognize this free speech, was Tyrone Yates, who's a pretty good friend of mine. And I wish, looking back, I had sided with him, because it is free speech. And frankly, I was kind of cowardly about it. Now, if I can say this about what happened in Lincoln Heights, I actually felt kind of a pride in the people in Lincoln Heights who showed up and protested. It kind of made me feel kind of good. the Klan and the Nazis, they hate Jews and blacks, okay? But the Klan is a little more known for terrorizing blacks, and the Nazis a little more known for terrorizing Jewish people. But I was kind of proud of what those people did. It meant a lot to me. And one other point, which Nathan sort of alluded to, is this something that just happened, or is this a result of the atmosphere created by Donald Trump? And it's hard for me to say, oh, no, that had nothing to do with it. Because the fact of the matter is, part of his constituency are white supremacists. Okay? I'm not saying all of his constituency, but there's no question. That's why when the Charlottesville thing happened, he said they're good people on both sides, because he didn't want to offend part of his base. Okay? And the releasing of those thugs from January 6th, I think I said this before, I think he sees that as his private militia. And so I'm fearful that these kind of incidents, perhaps next time including violence, are going to become more frequent.
Being from Kentucky, I really don't have a dog in the fight. I want to congratulate like Alabama Brawl. Look what it looked like, Alabama Brawl, and the people from Lincoln Heights, they showed up. Nathan, it's hot mic, right? It's hot mic. The pictures, are black people allowed in the neo-Nazi groups now? Is this one guy, there's the black guy, is he black? Is he, or the guy standing there right there over the one with the flag up high facing the camera, and then the other, is that a black man? Are the Nazis, are black people allowed to be in the neo-Nazis now? I mean, I'm just asking. Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
Well,
and here, let me explain that, because I'm good friends with and know both professionally and personally a gentleman by the name of Eric Ward, who has spent a lot of time infiltrating, interviewing, being a part of these so-called Nazi type groups, Nazi skinheads, those sorts of things. And yeah, they will accept black people who agree with their philosophies into their mold, not because they care about them, not because they particularly like them, but it helps them further their cause. I mean, it's no different than what we talk about. If you want to talk about the imagery of Samuel L. Jackson playing the Uncle Sam role in Kendrick Lamar, historically, white supremacists have loved to have black people that they could co-opt and carry their message and add legitimacy to a sense of legitimacy to what they do. So what was it Malcolm X said, that as soon as a black person comes out and says something, the first thing that white people do is go try to find another black person who will come and offset what was just said. And so, it may seem like an oxymoron or seem strange to have a black person in the movement, but that's always been the case of white supremacy. They've always used black people and co-opted black people to help them further their message, not because they care about you, but because they're glad to take a fool and use.
I want to ask a question after that.
Just like the Republican Party.
Yeah,
just like the Republican Party.
Cool. I want to ask another question after that. I like that dig. So if we know for a fact that George Soros and Antifa and all these people they do exercises, they do. You said you've studied these people, right? They do organized exercises to test the water, so to speak, to see how far can we go? How far can we go? Because I'm not saying I'm just asking from a subjective place, from outside the echo chamber, like I come from all the time. These guys who are horrible, they're horrible people. But do you think that they specifically targeted Lincoln Heights specifically to get the reaction? Then had the police officers, did anybody try to get the license plate number of this U-Haul? How come the police, why didn't they kick their butts? I'm tired of March. Hold on, Phil. Let me stop. Hold on, Phil. Let me finish. Why don't we kick their butts? Man, why we could keep marching, man? Kick some butt.
It's free speech. Either you believe in it.
Okay, if it's turn it up. If we're gonna go up there, we're gonna be a face off. Turn it up. They won't come back again.
What do you
They
mean
won't
turn it up?
ever come.
What do you mean?
What
Get
do I mean
violent?
turn it up? You know, I ain't turn it up. If
Get
they gonna come
violent?
there, they gonna come there. They gonna come there talk about, oh, we gonna kill you, nigga. We're gonna do this N-word. We're gonna do this to you. We're gonna do this to you. Prove it. Make them prove it. Until then, it don't
you're
mean
saying
nothing.
You're saying people
Turn it
opposed
up.
to that should engage in violence. Is that what you're saying? Tarris?
Yeah, that's what I
Is that what
heard.
you're saying, Tarris?
I'm saying I'm tired of the marching. Okay, I'm saying when are we gonna stop the marching and show these dudes what? Okay, prime
what do
example.
you mean?
Hold on,
What do you
Phil.
mean?
Let me finish. You keep cutting me off, Phil. 19-something fighting Irish. The Klan came to Notre Dame, and then white boys beat they butts. They call them the Fighting Irish because the Klan came to Notre Dame up here, to wherever that Terre Haute is. It Terre Haute where they're at in Notre Dame? In Notre Dame,
South
and
Bend.
they came in South Bend. The Klan came to South Bend because they wanted momentum in the 20s because they came through and they burned down Tulsa. And then they came to Indiana afterwards, and they came to the Klan, and they were met by Irish Catholic in the streets, and they kicked their butts. I'm tired of the
Tarris,
marching.
can I ask a question? Can I ask a question, Tarris? It seems like this has touched a nerve. My question is why? What is it about this story that really got you going?
I'm tired of the marching, man. We got to stop this marching. We shall overcome singing and marching. The Fighting Irish got a name by kicking the Klan's butt. And ain't nobody do nothing about it. We could kick their butts. Let's just kick their butts one time. They'll never come back again. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish got their name from that. What do you think the police going to do? They going to just shoot black people? They going to shoot the Klan? Kick their butts, man. That's why I'm about with it.
See, here's where I gotta stop Tarris because and channel my inner Nelson Mandela. You know, Tarris is sounding like Winnie Mandela right now, and you need a little Nelson Mandela common sense here because Nelson had enough sense to recognize, you know, when not to engage in a battle that you can't win. I think you cannot. Yeah. Look, let's just face it. If they'd have wound up in the wrong part of Lincoln Heights with some of them bros in Lincoln Heights, they absolutely would have got what Tarris was talking about. You know, before the police could have got there to intervene, they would have got that. Okay. But that would not have necessarily been the best resolution in this situation, because what's going to happen if that goes down? You got a group that's peacefully marching, bunch of black folks run up in there and get violent with them, where they have the right to be there. Who is going? They may catch a beat down, but guess who's going to jail? Guess who's going to jail? The black folks who were there. Guess who has the higher level of propensity to get choked out or shot in a situation like that? The black people. Okay. And let's just be honest, because this is a conversation that, we've had I don't know if we've had it on this podcast, but I know I've had it a few times, that part of the problem with some of our law enforcement agencies is you got some of these good old boys that's a part of the police force, the Cincinnati police force, the Evendale police force, name the community. There is a problem where you have the infiltration of some of these white supremacists who have actually infiltrated our military, that have infiltrated our law enforcement. So you can go into it with, we're going to kick their butt and they ain't coming back. But that's exactly the trap that they try to lay. That's exactly why they come up there and they say those languages, because they want to incite. They want to incite violence because they know that they're not going to be the ones to suffer. You're going to be the ones to suffer. And they're going to sit back and they're going to say, look at them. They're just the animals that we just talked about. That they just want to attack the white race and they can't be contained and they're so angry. This is why you got to be smarter. A lot of people look at these white supremacist groups and they think of them as just yahoos. And my argument has always been, they're playing chess, not checkers. We think of them as checkers players, but they chess players. And the greatest mistake that we make is to underestimate them as yahoos and checkers players. And we play the game of checkers that they want us to play. And that's why we have to be smarter about what our reaction to it is.
Well, you're talking about going to jail and stuff like that, and the risk of going to jail if you had an altercation with them, but you'll take the same risk to go down and stand in front of a police officer and take a bean bag or a smoke or pepper spray to the face. You'll do that's from a police officer, but you're gonna want to go kick a Klan member's butt. I don't get it.
But that's different. We see in those situations when people are protesting and the bean bags and the gas smoke, look, they're on the righteous side of the argument. And who always takes the brunt of the criticism for that? Police do. In those situations where police have inappropriately assaulted peaceful protesters. Now, if you're throwing a rock at a cop, if you're throwing a rock through a store window, then yeah, you're gonna get a bean bag and probably worse because you're breaking the law. But as long as you have the moral high ground where you are peacefully protesting, hey, look, black folks took water hoses back in the day, but Martin Luther King was adamant. Fire hoses and police dogs. Martin Luther King was adamant that nonviolence is the way that you hit the conscience of people and you make a change. The minute, just think, I made this case after George Floyd. The minute black people lost their moral high ground was when they started setting stuff on fire, and it changed the narrative. And I said at that point, that just wasn't smart. I understood it. I understand where the rioting and the looting and the violence and all of that stuff comes from. The pent-up frustration. But once you do that, you change the narrative with the people who want to change the narrative, and that's exactly what happened. You gotta be smart.
I have to agree to disagree, because I believe that if they come into Lincoln Heights, the historical black place, where I'm from in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, if the Klan ever came to Elizabethtown, Kentucky, and came to the bottom in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, they'd have to sort things out. That's all I know where I'm from in Kentucky. And I know in Lincoln Heights, that's why I know that there's more to it. Because I know that it's not just black and white like that, because I know how the Lincoln Heights came out in force, that they're about that life. That's why I know that it's a standoff thing. We got the Lincoln Heights people here now, and the police are in the middle. And as the Lincoln Heights people start to form, more police force starts to come. But who get in there and they barking back and forth? Come on, man. I just think that if the Klan and I'll stand on this, man. If the Klan comes into a neighborhood, there should be a federal law that it should be a hate crime, and we should be able to defend ourselves accordingly because of the egregious history of the Ku Klux Klan. That should be something that we should be fighting for. You say, what steps should we move forward? Let's use the Kendrick Lamar conversation about how frustrated we are, and then we bounce that into what we're going through with Lincoln Heights, and say, this is what we're talking about. Administration, you give a hate crime for the Asians, you give the hate crime for all these people. Let's take tangibles to the legislation and say, give us hate crimes, give us bills. If that's what, but again,
you're just not being realistic. You're just not being realistic, and you're not playing on history. There is no government entity, there's no law enforcement agency that is going to side with black people when black people turn violent. That's just the fact of the matter. That has never been the case. Point to me at one point in time in history where black people beating white people down or doing whatever has resulted in the type of change that you're talking about. It's never happened.
I'm not saying beating white people down.
The only thing that it's resulted in is black people getting killed. It's black
match energy with energy.
You're not going to beat the federal government that way. You're not going to beat these local police departments that way. You're not. Here's something to me. If you want to make a case, here's something to me that would be worth more bashing heads in for, but you won't agree with this because it's easier to go after some neo-Nazis. Black folks in Lincoln Heights ought to be more upset rather than some Nazis showing up on the bridge. Black people in Lincoln Heights need to be more upset with the fact that the surrounding communities around them annexed all of their businesses and economic wealth that they had. Lincoln Heights used to be one of the wealthiest communities, black communities in the country. Okay, not just in Cincinnati, in the country. But all of that got annexed away by their surrounding communities. And Lincoln Heights is left with what they're left with today. If you want to talk about something that's worth knuckling up about, that's worth knuckling up about more so than 12 yahoos standing on a bridge using the N-word. But see, this is the type of thing that we as black people got to grow past. This this anger and violence that comes from a sense of powerlessness. We are fighting for the wrong thing. These neo-Nazis yelling the N-word on the bridge ain't doing nothing to impact the folks of Lincoln Heights. But when they take your businesses, when they take your economic power, that is something that folks should have knuckled up about.
Kevin, you know I disagree. That one point.
I knew you would.
Go. Whenever you have emotionally involved Black Americans, when they're easily emotionally involved by stuff like this could be a spark off of more things to come. This could be a beginning stage. This could be a Jesse Smollett to a Breonna Taylor to a George Floyd. This could be a spark that could have been done with. So I'm saying, as you're right, you're completely right. Let's look at the bigger picture. But a lot of times we're talking, me and us on this panel, we're talking about intelligent thinking people. When we're talking about people who don't think on the, who are being led, they're emotionally driven, ready to go and have their AK-47s on the side of the road. So I'm saying, instead of marching with their guns, look at us, turn up one time, and then I bet you they'll never come back again.
Well, they did turn up, and
I also wanted to add
before we started the show.
Well, I also want to add that the instance on Friday wasn't the only instance. There have been 8 other instances. If you watch the town hall meetings that people have been posting, there have been 8 other instances within Lincoln Heights and that surrounding area of those people returning and agitating that community. So it's not just about what happened on Friday, because as we know, our oppressors don't just come mess with us and then leave us alone. They continue to antagonize us because they want a reaction. And the only reaction that they have gotten is the residents of Lincoln Heights arming themselves and protecting their communities and the children within those communities. So it ain't just about that one instance that happened on Friday. They have returned and they've been doing stuff to that community ever since.
Yeah, good point. I'm glad you made that point, because you know, the last thing I read is that they were like armed.
Your mic went out, Nathan.
Can't hear your mic is
Yep, still can't hear you.
You said somebody else jump in.
I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts.
I know Nathan well enough. I could pretend to be him.
Go ahead. Unleash your inner barbarian, Phil.
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
He's back. He's back. I was going to give it the
you guys hear me now?
Talk about how I'm a humble host and I'm a barbarian, but go ahead, Nathan. You're back.
Yeah, can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
All right, great. I'm my bad. You know, you spend all this money in electronics. It just does what it wants to do when it wants to do it sometime. But yeah, to Raven's point, you know, the last thing I read is that there are actually armed Lincoln Heights residents who are like patrolling the streets right now, because there's been multiple incidences. It's not just one. And I'm glad she made that point. You know, I'm glad that people stood up, because that was a test.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, this is a reminder, and sometimes we need these reminders that these kind of people are around us, and they harbor these very hateful feelings about us, right? There are people out there that really believe a lot of the worst things that we say about racists. That's because these people are actually here. This was a test. These people have always been here. They are emboldened by Donald Trump and all of his rhetoric. Him being reelected is just like, for them, it's like a signal that, yeah, our cause is righteous. The white supremacist cause is righteous. Him allowing those J6 people to be pardoned, many of them very violent people with a history of racism, like Enrique Torres, leader of the Proud Boys, and others. You know, him pardoning them, giving them, you know, access to the streets is just a signal for these people to do more. So I will not be surprised if we see more of it. But I do understand where Kevin was going with it. And in that way, I was like, yeah, he's thinking like a barbarian right there, right? Like, I see it both ways. Like, I'm glad that the men and the women and the good people of Lincoln Heights were ready to do whatever it took to say not here. You've got to meet it where it is sometime. I'm glad they do that. I would be hopeful and wish that all of this energy, I see a lot of people are emotional, they're very mad, they're angry. I would just hope that some of this could be directed to like the macro plans, like the larger plots about public policy. I think the point that Kevin made was spot on about all the businesses being annexed. I mean, there's some real things that if we could get people to be focused on, then we could really make a change about. And that would be a good thing. However, I'm cynical these days, y'all. You know, I'm just wondering, is this just gonna fizzle out by next week, and it'll be the same old, same old. I'm hopeful, but I'm cynical at the same time because I've seen these kind of situations happen. Everybody gets mad. Black people got to stay together. In 2 weeks, we're on to the next thing, right? We forgot all about it.
Let's keep some
Now,
in mind.
now, let me say, there's always a core group of people who have always been fighting the good fight in all these neighborhoods, and those people gonna keep on. But I'm talking about the larger masses, right? You know, we get caught up emotionally, right? And to Kevin's point, I'm with you, bro. I'm thinking, what about all the other, you know, public policy issues where you've got, in most cases, white men in suits. They're not carrying a flag. They're not easily identifiable, but they're every bit as evil. They mean every bit of harm to you, but they're doing it through public policy. And because it's not so obvious, most people don't see the plot.
I think that we ought to also keep in mind what, and maybe it's just symbolism, but what Elon Musk has been doing of late.
Oh yeah, that's
Okay,
part of
first
it.
of all, you know, it's cute. He gives a Nazi salute, and you know, there. I've listened to a lot of commentators. Nobody, there's no real like, oh no, he didn't mean that. And he, by the way, he also recently he has been a strong proponent of a group, the party, the kind of neo-Nazi party in Germany. I don't know what they call them, National Front or something. He's gone there and he has endorsed them and probably given money to them. And if you remember his recent comment that he said it in Germany or about Germany was, it's kind of time we got over the Holocaust. That's the gist of what he said. It's about time we get over. I mean, that is whether you call it a dog whistle or a guarded a message out. That to me is a very scary thing. And kind of Raven was talking before about movies about slavery as if, oh, we got to get past that. No, we can't get past any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, here's what I was saying. Don't misinterpret, you know, any of the things that I said about not meeting or not rising to the challenge of meeting them showing up in these communities. There's a difference between saying that and saying that we need to become violent. You're never gonna hear me advocate violence unless, now if they come at individuals, if they come at people's families, if they initiate the violence, then you have a right to defend yourself and do whatever you have to do. But as far as being the initiators of violence against this group, I'll never say that that's the right tack to take, because in my opinion, we're not going to win in that scenario. And whatever sense of satisfaction you might get by a beatdown, you're going to pay for it on the other end of the penalty and wind up hurting your family and your community more through those actions. And that is the mind of, just for me, people who are just thinking emotionally and not logically, because there are forceful ways that you can meet them that don't involve violence. There are ways that you can make people feel unwelcome in your community and let them know that they're not welcome there, that don't mean I gotta bust you upside the head. I think that's just my personal belief that that's small thinking. I think it just can't be Black people either who are rising to meet this. I think it has to be community wide. I think it has to be every organization, every business, every person of color, every white person in Lincoln Heights has to rise up and stand up and say, not here. And we're not going to allow that here. And we're going to do everything within our power to let these folks know that if you show up here, you're not going to receive a warm welcome. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be met with violence. That's my only point.
And Phil, I'm a little disappointed in you.
Really?
Yeah, because you're the lawyer of the crew.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, and by no means do I have to be right. But I do recall in some brain cell that I haven't accessed in a long time that this is not protected speech.
It is.
Because the Supreme Court, to my knowledge, said that hate speech is not protected speech.
No, that's not true. That's not true.
And swastikas are hate speech.
No, see, that's what the city council tried to do.
That's not true? Okay.
Not true.
When I was on city council, I told you.
I will trust but verify.
They tried to do that with the Klan. And again, we were concerned about the image. So Tyrone Yates was the only one willing to stand up and say, hey, it's like it or not, it's free speech. And it's the same thing with that demonstration. Again, if they engaged in any violence or anything, that's totally different. Okay. But hate speech is still free speech. And by the way, I'll tell you something along those lines that, and remember, what that means is the government cannot do anything against it. What really disgusts me is that since Trump won, or maybe just before that, you'll note that sites like, I think, Facebook, Twitter, and others, that those are private companies. They have the right to ban anything they want. And they have chosen, because they're scared of Trump, to allow hate speech. I was listening to a news report the other day about X and one or two of these others, on X particularly, just hateful, racist rhetoric. And Elon Musk, he's not the government. He has every right to keep that out, as they did after January 6th. But he's letting it on.
Well, Phil, guess what? I'm no longer disappointed in you, because I looked it up and it appears you're right. All right. So I'm no longer disappointed.
I feel redeemed.
But can we also talk about the laws that were broken? Because if you watched some of the things that went down at the Lincoln Heights Town Hall meeting, there were certain things that happened on that bridge that were unlawful, which is why people have an issue, with the response to law enforcement and how they handle that situation.
What was illegal, Raven?
According to some of the codes, the Ohio codes that have been put out, particularly I saw some things from what is that man's name? Malik Durant's. He is on Lincoln Heights Council. The if I'm not mistaken, that bridge is federal property, and you are not allowed to hang signage up there. That is against the law. I also am, if I'm not mistaken, if you are a protester, it is unlawful for you to cover your face when you are protesting. That is unlawful. It is also unlawful to incite violence. What do you think is going to happen if you have a bunch of white supremacists standing in a historically black neighborhood armed with assault rifles and yelling and screaming the N-word at passersby? That is inciting violence.
Let's talk about inciting violence. The legal standard, I think Kevin would probably agree with me on this. The legal standard for inciting violence is that you have to tell somebody to do something criminal. You have to say, shoot that guy or hit that guy. Okay, which, by the way, Donald Trump, you might remember in his campaign speeches, particularly the first time, he told his audience to beat the guy up and I'll pay your legal fees. But the fact that actually is inciting violence. Okay, but you cannot. It is not, the law does not allow you to say, well, because his speech is hateful and therefore they were inciting violence. It's just not what the law says.
Yeah. And I think that that's important. I mean, and Raven, I'm not disputing, some of the things that you said, whether these things are legal or not, but I do think it's important. And I said this in my initial comments, that it's important that you understand what the laws are. As Phil said, what actually is legal and illegal, not just what you dislike or what you think ought to be legal or illegal. That matters, because a lot of times we get up in arms as a community about things that are actually legal, but we're mad because they're legal. Well, that's a different type of, when we're talking about what type of action that we should take, then that's a different type of action. So if the action is, we think this should be illegal, but it's actually legal, then those are things that you have to go through the legislative system, to try to address and to try to change that. If we don't think that these things should be legally allowed and we see the nature of them, then those are things that you might have to get lawyers involved in, that you might have to go to court with, that you might have to vote for and make political issues in campaigns. So I think if we're going to be mad, one, it's important that we make sure that we have all of the facts, not just hearsay, not what somebody think they saw or whatever, actual facts. Take those facts, find out what the law and the policies are, and go there. And then if we have legal redress for that, then that is what we have to do, as opposed to just complaining. If there was something that was done illegal and the police department didn't enforce it, then maybe there's some action to be taken against the city and the police department there to get the results that you want. So I think when we start talking about what actions we need to make, we got to make sure we got our facts straight. And then how do we redress it? How do we actually deal with what the actual issue is there that we have a problem with? And I think that when we're talking about taking action and taking movement, like those are the sorts of things that can help prevent incidents like what we saw there. So if in fact that was indeed a federal bridge there, what does the law actually say about that? And if that's the case and the police didn't enforce it, then what are we going to do? What's the next step there?
Well, put it this way, I've seen a lot of signs or whatever on those kind of bridges that say "Go Bengals," things like that. So I'll be honest, I haven't researched the legality, but that happens a lot in more kinder contexts.
Absolutely, and I do believe that after the fact that there were some people up there who hung some signs that said love or something like that after the fact. And I'm not saying that people should be targeted with specific laws just because we don't like what they did. But if we're going to address this issue the way in a way that is legal, that does have some substantial backing to it, then as you said, Kevin, I don't agree. I don't disagree. We have to know the law. I'll give you one right now. According to the Ohio Revised Code, it is not legal to ride in the back of the U-Haul, as the law prohibits passengers from riding in the cargo area of a truck, trailer, or semi-trailer, which includes the cargo area of a U-Haul truck. That is outlined in section 4511.51 of the Ohio Revised Code. That is illegal. That is a legal activity. And so for police or law enforcement to then come forth and say, well, we couldn't do anything because what they were doing wasn't illegal. Yes, it was. And that's the issue that the community has with law enforcement when you respond to these kinds of things. Because, yeah, okay, cool. The hate speech and the showing up with a swastika and all that other stuff, it wasn't legal. It was within their First Amendment rights. But you have recourse that you can take. Because we know that when you're dealing with a black person, if you pull me over with a broken tail light, you have reasonable cause to pull me over and then ask me about anything else that you suspect I might have done that was illegal. Black people know it don't take much for law enforcement to enact action when they have suspicions or something, or when they assume that a law has been broken. And that's the issue that we have when they respond to issues like this. You have all the discretion in the world, all the discretion in the world when it pertains to us and the things that we're doing in our day-to-day lives. But when it comes to somebody showing up to a historically black neighborhood to spew hate speech, there were things that could have been done that were not done. And that's the issue. And it also, again, it lends to that contention that our community has with law enforcement. Because when we ask you to come and protect and serve us, drop the ball every time.
So
There
this
are
is
things that could be done
Kevin,
that never
Kevin
get
said the
done.
same thing.
So this is my answer to that, Raven. This is my answer to that. So, and maybe this is already a foot in the community, and I hope that it is. So this is where, whether it was Evendale or Lincoln Heights, I'm not sure what the law enforcement agency was that responded there, whether it was county sheriffs or whatever. Then what needs to happen is that needs to be taken to the village councils or the city councils. It needs to be taken to the law enforcement. A complaint needs to be filed. You need to follow all of the requisite proper channels to make your complaint known, because just simply sitting back and saying, well, they treat us different, that's not going to change it. So you've got to hold them accountable. And here's where we have to get smarter in these instances as well. Everybody got a cell phone. So somebody should have been, as opposed to just being mad at the neo-Nazis and yelling back at them, somebody needs to be recording everything, finding out who the officers are on the scene. I want your name. I want your badge number, right? I'm going to get video footage of them loading up in the back of the U-Haul and driving away. So now that when I go to make my complaint or make my legal redress or whatever, I have evidence, not just hearsay or whatever, because that's the first thing that they're going to ask you for is what evidence you, but I didn't get any. So again, these are situations where we have to learn to not just get caught up in our emotions, but to be smart about, hey, look, this is how we get them. If they're breaking the law, I'm gonna get evidence. I'm gonna get footage. I'm gonna find out who the officers was there that didn't do
Absolutely. And from my understanding and from some of the conversations that I've been having with community leaders, that is in progress. So
Okay.
this is not something that we're just talking about and then we're going to walk away from this conversation and there's no action behind it. I'm only mentioning this thing because it's something that is currently in progress and it's happening. Somebody who, like I said, Malik Durance Daniels, he is on Lincoln Heights City Council. He's the one who provided that information. There are community leaders right now working to make sure that what you're talking about is in action.
And that's what I would like to add to this. I would like to add to this when I was saying, whenever I guess I was emotional and I was up here and you guys didn't hear me. That's exactly what I was saying. I was saying, hey, let's get legislation written. Now would be the time. why not more time if you got Aftab Tiraval, who's able to speak at the DNC? He can get up there and he can speak. He can, Landsman and all these people, they can present legislation right now. And they got the case study, they got all this and say, hey, we've been given Asian hate crime, all these other crime bills.
All right.
It's time.
You're confusing.
Why are you rolling your eyes? Why are you afraid? Are the Democrats afraid to ask for something? Are you afraid to go ask for tangibles? Are you afraid to ask for tangibles?
The Democrats have been asking for this, but it's your party that's been blocking it. And here's the very real reality. They've been trying for years to get an anti-lynching law passed, in the country, and couldn't even get something as simple as an anti-lynching law, through Congress. Because look, let's just face it. Donald Trump, and this gets back to one of the statements that was made earlier, is Donald Trump has created an environment where he's emboldened individuals like these. He's made them feel like they're part of the team, that they're part of the Republican Party, that they're part of that MAGA contingent that helped to get him elected. And he's not going to say anything against these folks. He's not going to move to have anything done against these folks, because he wants every vote that he can get, no matter how deplorable, no matter how objectionable it might be. He wants it all. So he set this tone, no doubt. I can't remember who said it, but he's unleashed this. I'm not saying that it wasn't already present. I mean, look, every year we write stories about the KKK littering flyers around various neighborhoods. Usually about once a year, a swastika gets painted on Hebrew Union College or some Jewish edifice around the city. These things are not uncommon. They happen all the time, unfortunately. But there's definitely been a ramp up in the Trump era. And I think all of the statistics point to that. It's undeniable.
There was a ramp up during the first term. It was well documented, right? Yeah. So, that's why a lot of us didn't vote for Trump, because we knew what was the vibe he was bringing. It wasn't just his policy and his narcissistic me attitude, hearing him whine like a baby all the damn time, but it was everything that came with it. You know what I'm saying? We just didn't want to deal with that again. One last thing about Lincoln Heights, I think is lovely. Stand up for a community, that is great. But every time I think about Lincoln Heights, I think to myself that those people deserve reparations for having to endure being next to that police facility for so long. And I know there's been some studies, I can't tell the people of Lincoln Heights what to do, man, but it would be a beautiful thing if they had the money to get the lawyers to investigate, to see if they actually have a case against the city of Cincinnati, because it's not enough just to move that gun range. Those people need to be made whole and pay for their pain and suffering and whatever long-term effects that generations.
What was the pain and suffering you're referring to?
The pain and suffering of living next to the gun range.
But what was the suffering? I mean, other than the fact they were next door.
You want to live next to a gun range, not only are you dealing with the noise pollution, but the pollution in terms of, the charge of the gun. Like, this is.
Yeah, I think, and we've had this conversation before, and I don't disagree with you. I think the challenge is, to Phil's point, is in order to get that, unless you have a favorable August body who's going to approve that without much evidence of actual damages, like that's going to be the challenge. And I'm not saying that there's not evidence.
I acknowledged when I was saying that. I was like, I wish they had the resources to do the groundwork to see if they had a case, right? Because I understand how this works, right? I wish they had those resources, because the long-term effects of living next to that gun range, and again, I'm not trying to equivocate, to me, have been far more harmful to the Lincoln Heights residents than these neo-Nazis. Not that I want to equivocate. It's not my pain. It's not my neighborhood. I'm not trying to lessen anything, right? But it's just the way my mind thinks.
I agree with you on that. I mean, that's the same statement that I made about, the annexation. It's like, I'd love to see us get as upset about these sorts of things as we do about the neo-Nazis, as we do about the N-word, which, beyond having to hear it, has no real impact or effect on your life. And in fact, I was talking to somebody and they was like, why don't they get something else? Like, the N-word just is not as impactful as it once was, back in the day on folks. And I tend to agree with that. I mean, is it shocking? Shocking, yes, but somebody calling me the N-word, you know what? I'm still go to the bank. I'm still cash my check. I'm still get my ride. I'm still ride to my house, and you're going to go do what you do. So
Yeah, but
that
you're
has
saying
very
that
little.
here
It
though,
has
Kevin.
very little social
It's
impact.
different when it's in your face, right?
I'm not.
Let's be
Again,
real.
I'm not saying, Nathan. I'm not saying that it don't sting. I'm not saying, but really,
I'm just saying it's different when a grown man, a grown white man, is calling you the N-word in your face.
Hard
That's
R.
different. Like we all know that, but it's different when somebody right there in your space and you can feel the energy and you can look in this man's eyes and then you thinking about all the stuff that happened to your people. It's a whole different thing when it's right in front of you. But
Yeah,
I
but
do agree
so
with
let me
you
ask you
saying.
this. So let me ask you this. You beat him down. You get arrested. You go to jail.
You
You
good.
lose your job. You lose your job. You can't feed your family. Now your family looking at you.
There you go with the
And
worst
what you
case
gonna say?
scenario.
What you gonna say? This grown white
Maybe
man
I don't get
called me
arrested.
the
Worst
N
case
word, and I couldn't
scenario,
let him get
Kevin.
away with it.
That's the
I
worst
mean,
case
if
scenario.
that's you, do
Maybe,
you? That's not me.
maybe I lay him out and I roll out, I peel out, and he never sees me again. You
Yeah,
never
okay.
know.
All right, but that
You
might
never
work
know.
out for you.
I
That
mean,
might work
damn,
out
who's
for you.
writing this story? You are no longer in charge of writing stories no more, bro. They
Can
always
we
was this.
also can
That
we
might work
also
out for you.
can we also acknowledge the fact that and I understand what Kevin is saying, that somebody calling you the N word does evoke a certain level of emotion that comes with action. I understand that much more than what Nate was talking about, which is this whole gun range situation. Me personally, the only people from Lincoln Heights that I've heard talk about the effects of that gun range have been my elders, because they have been in that community the longest, and so they know what that impact is because they've been alive long enough to know it and see it and experience it. But I would challenge that idea and say that it's simply because the lack of education. Like I think that we like to neglect the fact that a lot of the community is not as educated as we think it is. And I don't mean it in terms of of intelligence, but I mean just access to information, the passing down of information. We have to really address the issue as a community that we have with passing down knowledge and information to the youth, because you look around and you try to figure out why the youth don't care about nothing. It's because they don't know about nothing. It's because they don't have the privilege that I've had to be able to be put in positions where I have learned by sitting at the feet of my elders. I have learned the different things that affect different communities in the city, and I never would have had that had it not been for me working somewhere like the Buzz, where all we do is talk about the issues that affect the community. I have been privileged in that way. I can't say that I would know the significance of Lincoln Heights outside of a situation like this. There are so many young people who are learning about the significance of Lincoln Heights and the historical Black community that it is. In the last week, the last few days, they've learned about that because of the neo-Nazis popping up over there and standing on that bridge. Beforehand, they had no idea the significance of the community that they lived in, unless they had elders to sit at the feet of to give them that information. And so I get what you're saying, Kevin. That kind of stuff, it does evoke some emotion that then also tends to lend to action. But if we know that, we also need to understand that the reason why they don't care about nothing else is because they don't know about nothing else. And so, what are we gonna do instead of playing the blame game and saying, "Well, y'all don't care enough about the stuff that I care about, so it don't matter"? What are we gonna do to educate people? That's the issue that we're facing at every turn when we try to figure out why the black community don't be on one accord about stuff, or why we don't move when stuff happens, or why certain other communal issues that are more long lasting than a bunch of neo-Nazis popping up randomly somewhere. It's because we don't know. It's because we're not educated enough. So what are we gonna do to educate each other? That's how you answer that question. That's how you deal with that issue. Where is the education? Who's gonna do the educating? And how do we go move forward in that?
I
Because if
detect
we just gonna
no.
talk about, well, you don't care either if you're not gonna educate. If you have information and you won't use it to educate somebody, you are just as useless. So
I
what are we gonna
detect.
do?
I detect no bad questions. I detect no bad questions. We'll leave it right there. I've got a video that I want to play for you of Alicia Reece. That's Hamilton County Commissioner Alicia Reece. Apparently, she got into it with a construction worker over a parking space, but she has some words that she wanted to share. I want to play this for
There
you and
is
then get your
never a
thoughts
dull
about it.
moment, but I don't want to take it necessarily lightly. There is a tone that has started from the top down at the federal level that is working its way down to the local level. It's not just executive orders and policies, but it's creating a tone. And I was very upset today. We have to park in front of the building just like City Hall parks in front of it. I was at City Hall, we had parking. When I was at the state legislature, we had parking. And the county commissioners, there's only 3 of us, and there's parking in front for us. And we have some cones there to identify, as well as some signage. And this morning, myself and Commissioner Dumas were pulling in to park in our assigned parking spaces in front of the building. And I got out because the cones were there to move the cones so that we could park where we're supposed to park. And a gentleman rushed over across the street from a parking area, and he snatched the cone out of my hand. And he said, "You can't touch this cone and you can't park here." Well, I said, well, maybe he didn't know who I was. So I identified myself. I said, wait a minute, I'm a county commissioner, pointed to the sign, this is where we park. He said he don't give a who I am. I can't touch these cones. These are cones for him and the workers. Well, luckily, I saw Commissioner Dumas got out of her car to say, what in the world's going on? And the sheriff came out. And when the sheriff came out, he explained to him, and he still seems as though he didn't care. Now, this is not the type of workers or contractors or attitudes that we're trying to bring down here to Hamilton County. To snatch out of I don't care who the person was, but to snatch something out of someone's hands is already bad enough. But then they identified that they are an elected official, and they said they don't care. It's the attitude we don't want down here in Hamilton County. So I want to thank the administrator, says he's going to look into it, but I want to send a message to everybody from purchasing to procurement to directors. We are not going to have that type of attitude, the 234-year system that we had long ago. And I want the gentleman identified. I want to know what company he's with. And we can't have that type. I don't want those kind of people working on our project.
Wow. So she says, I don't want those kind of people working on our project. So is this worker, was he way out of line, or is Alioca Reece being sensitive? What do you think?
He had a day moment from top flight security of the world from Friday After Next. Whenever him and Craig were in that thing, he's like, if anything pops off around here, I'm gonna go get me some today. That's it. So he's got top flight moment, and I commend Alioca Reece. I sit over here on the side of the river, and just everything she does over there, I'm like, yeah, because that's exactly, you got to teach people how to treat you sometimes, and in that position, especially as an elected official. If he didn't know, if he didn't know, he's gonna find out today, and he's gonna tell everybody else. Why'd you lose your job, Craig? How you lose? That black lady over there got me fired, and we should expose him. I think we should. That's what I'm talking about. Let's find out who he is, and let's say this particular gentleman right here talk crazy to our elected official, and this is what we are not going to do. I'll rest.
Phil, you were an elected official. What do you think?
Well, I'm a little biased because I served with Alioca in city council, and I always liked her, and she never struck me as, she's not a belligerent kind of person. You know, she's not somebody who's looking to pick fights with people. So I was kind of sympathetic to her, as I would be for anybody who kind of was treated that way, whether they're county commissioner or not. I mean, why can't a guy say, excuse me, ma'am, you can't park here, and be polite, as opposed to be so disrespectful. When I first saw that clip, I was thinking, well, she shouldn't have said something publicly. She should have just gone to the county administrator. And I can guarantee you, if she had, this guy would have been disciplined just as he will be in this case. But as I was just watching this now, I kind of changed my mind, because I think she made a good point. And the point is basically, this is not how we treat people. Has nothing to do, even if you're just an average person, nobody should be treated that way, with that kind of disrespect.
So let me just say this, and I'll just preface it with, with often I've been accused of being an Alioca Reece defender. But here's what I would say is go back and watch the video, because the whole interaction was about 40 seconds. And I will say this, none of us know beyond what Alicia's testimony was, what the conversation was back and forth between her and dude. I will say this, Alicia in her statement said dude snatched the cone out of her hand. You watch the video, that did not happen. Now, she later amended it, I think later in her conversation, where you could see she moved the cone, the guy moved it, came back, got it, set it down, so forth and so on. Just watch the video. The video's posted on Cincinnati.com. It shows from the time Alicia pulled up. And I don't say that to disparage Alicia or say that she's wrong or to say that she should not feel how she feels. I'm just looking at it objectively and just kind of giving you my opinion and saying we don't know what the exchange was between the two. Alicia said what she said, and what she said the guy said, and I have no reason to disbelieve that that is what she said is not what he said. We can't tell because the video has no audio on it. You can only see what you can see. And I try to think about, okay, if I was in his situation, if I was in her situation, what happened? Like, she kind of pulls up, the cones are clearly there blocking the parking space. She gets out of her car, she moves the cone. Now, if I'm the dude, I'm just being fair and objective. If I'm the guy, I don't know who Alicia Reece is, I don't know who that is running up, moving, these cones that are obviously there for a reason. Okay. She turns her back, goes to move, and goes to get a second cone. While she does that, the guy moves the cone back, and you can see her setting the other cone on the sidewalk. And I'm assuming that that's where words were exchanged there. Now, according to her, she made the statement that, hey, this is where commissioners park here. Something to the effect of, do you know who I am? And the guy responded back to her, I don't give a F who you are. You can't be touching these cones or whatever. Now, clearly
who isn't going to say that in that moment?
Yeah,
who isn't going to say that in that moment?
Now, clearly that is not a civil response in that situation.
It's not.
But again, we don't know what kind of base Alicia came with the do you know who I am? We don't. I mean, let's just make a truthful telling that sometimes the tone of conversations can escalate, right? I'm saying we don't know that.
And so Kevin, I want to agree with you, bro. But I want to agree with you. But like you just said, if you're in his situation and somebody says to you, do you know who I am? And you don't know who they are, who they are, what are you going to say? You're going to say, I don't give a damn who. That's anybody in the world is going to respond like that or something very close to that. So I get what you're saying.
So I'm just thinking about the human element and the interaction of how things could go in that situation based on what I see. And again, I'm acknowledging that there was no audio. We don't know what was said. I'm just basing it off of what I seen from the video. And I would encourage everybody, if you haven't seen it, go back, watch the video, see it for yourself, compare that to the couple of statements that she's made at the county commission and come to your own conclusion on it. Look, to her point about the tone, and I'm sure, look, we're all feeling a certain type of way right now about Donald Trump and where people are and all of that type of stuff. And I say this all the time, like when people read a news article, you bring to that article whatever it is that you're dealing with and however you're feeling it. So you're going to read it through that prism. Like, people always talk about media bias, but they don't think about the bias they're bringing to whatever it is that they're watching or that they're reading. You come in with a suitcase full of stuff when you read something, when you watch something. So you're going to view it through that lens. So this guy's reaction to Alicia, she obviously took that as, hey, this is just a part of that. This is part of that good old boy Donald Trump tone.
Right.
The fact that this guy is talking to me that way. And it might not have been, it could have been that. It might not have been that. It might have been dude was just offended that this lady got the audacity to just come up and start moving cones around without asking anything. It could have just been as simple as that.
Well, let me ask you this.
We don't know.
But let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. Let's say Alicia Reece is white.
We don't know that.
Does he interact with her the same way? I'm asking what you think, though.
So I don't think, if you're asking me what I think, okay, we're going to assume that a white person is going to pull up and do exactly the same thing, Alicia.
Exact same thing, but she's white.
We're saying the exact same thing. Would the guy have said something?
Would he have been like, I don't give a damn who you are? Would he have said it to a white woman?
Maybe not. I don't know.
Exactly.
I can't say that for if you're asking me just on a gut instinct, do I think that he would have done that to a white lady? The black in me is gonna say no, but I gotta admit that I'm coming at it again with that bias and that lens of how I perceive we often get treated in situations. So that is a bias I'm bringing to that answer, and I have to acknowledge that.
Right,
As a black Republican, I've got to say, man, the thing that I deal with and I do not like the most about Trump being president is the way white boys act. I tell you, man, it's the most annoying thing. Their chest is all puffed out. They think that Trump's just, I mean, I can't stand it. So that I'm always look. I mean, and I'm glad you mentioned what you mentioned, Kevin, because I was all for Alicia with that. I was like, oh, they said that, and I didn't take time to stop. I got emotional again, but I can understand where you're coming from because I got my chip on my shoulder because I believe that all white boys like that they think that Trump that gives them the opportunity to kind of stick your chest out in the Alabama brawl, so to speak. So I'm always on the defense when it comes to those type of people. And like, I would meet it with the same energy. If he's coming with that energy, I'm coming with that energy back to let them know I'm not the one. You can try that with any other person you might see, Trump supporter on, and I'll speak that freely to all of them. You try that anyone you want to try it with, but you try it with me, I'm gonna meet you with that same energy.
What's your take, Raven?
I have a very interesting take, and bear with me because I understand that I am the only woman in the conversation, and so it might be a little difficult for y'all to grasp what I'm about to say. I'm a black woman in
Come on with it.
America. I'm a black woman in America. There are certain experiences that I have that even my black brothers who are sitting here talking and having this conversation with me, you've never had before because you're not a black woman. And so what I understand, even on a professional level, people take instances like this to talk to me any kind of way, whether I'm in the wrong or not. They take instances to talk to me any kind of way because the simple fact that I am not only black but female. And with Alicia Reece, I wouldn't be surprised if this whole situation had something to do with that as well. Like, yeah, might have had something to do with her being black, but but I can guarantee you, it also probably had something to do with her being black and female. Because what I do believe is that if she was a black man, it probably would have been a different conversation. Men don't typically run up on other men and just start saying crazy stuff or disrespectful stuff out of nowhere. It's some lead up to that. Even if it happens, there's lead up that comes with that. When a black woman, right off the bat, people are talking to you crazy because not only do I not have to fear you because you're black, you're a female, you're a woman. I don't fear anything from you because you're female. And so if I know that even if I say something crazy to you and it get physical, I could probably still kick your ass. So there's a layer of that as well. But let me also say this. I think in general people are rude as fuck. If I'm just being real with you, in general, people, whether they believe in whether they're Trumpster or not, people are in America genuinely rude as all hell. You can ask people who are from other places. When we go to other places and we visit other places, we have a sense as Americans of entitlement that comes with when we are places and we think that somebody is doing something we don't think that they should be doing. Point in case, if you've ever been somewhere and you've been somewhere with if it's a white woman present or a white man present, and there happens to be somebody of Hispanic descent in the same vicinity and they're speaking in their native tongue, which is Spanish. I've seen it one too many times where they feel uncomfortable because how dare you be in America and not speak English? Like, these are the kinds of things that happen often. But outside of racism, it's just an American thing to be rude as all fuck for no reason. This is what we're known for all across the globe. And so even if it has nothing to do with race, even if it has nothing to do with her being black and female, Americans are rude as fuck. We have a tendency to walk into situations and think that we know everything and feel entitled and tell somebody, well, I don't know, I don't give a fuck who you think you are. Like, that's on brand for Americans, period. And especially white male Americans, because they feel the most entitled of all of us. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this ain't had nothing to do with race, if it didn't have nothing to do with her gender. He just rude as fuck. And he did something rude as fuck. And there might also be an instance, and I'm not trying to, take the brunt off of racism because it could very well be. But if it's not, I wouldn't be surprised if he was just a rude ass white man talking to her crazy because he felt like it. I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. It's been received.
So let me just say this to piggyback on what Raven said. And like I said, when I look at situations, I try to step back and take a look at the situations objectively. So that's why I say go back If you haven't seen the video, go back and watch the video. I agree with everything that Raven said. Like as much of it probably could have been the fact that he felt like he could have said that and got that off because it was a woman. He probably wouldn't have. Maybe he would have. Maybe he would have squared up with a black man in that same way. I doubt it. But there probably is something to do with the fact that he probably felt like he could get that off against Alicia with a minimum of confrontation. Because what is she going to do?
What is she going to do? But be mad and talk about it. She ain't gonna. She not gonna defend herself because what sound-minded woman would see a man acting threatening towards her and decide I'm about to buck up and put my dukes up? I'm not finna do that because if you kill me or do something to me, ain't nobody looking for me anyway. And I know this is a black woman in America. If you do something to me, ain't nobody coming to look for me. Ain't nobody, police, especially law enforcement, they don't give a damn what happened to me.
Like
and so it's just. It's one of those things where as a black woman you kind of deal with this kind of stuff on a regular basis. Unfortunately enough, Alicia Reece is in a position as commissioner of Hamilton County where she has the platform to talk about this and be taken seriously. But as just a regular plain old black woman who walks through this city and deals with this kind of stuff on a regular basis, the same thing has happened to me 20 times and ain't nobody knew nothing about it because I know what this is. I know what city I live in. Cincinnati has always been kind of a hot plate, a hotbed for this kind of activity. So I think that the interesting part about it is it just happened to be Alicia Reece, County Commissioner.
Well, here's a video right now. People can check it out. If you haven't seen it, so that's Alicia Reece and she's moving the cone. It's like a comedy. He puts the cone right back.
So you can see right there, that's probably when the verbal altercation took place.
She can't. She up on him too. You know who I am? And here comes the shit. I come to fuse all
Well,
wish we had audio. I wish we had audio because that would be able to see.
Yeah. So the audio. Look, here's my point, and I do this in my own personal life in situations like if you just look at it and you say, hey, if I had this to do all over again, how could I have handled this situation differently? And if you watch that video, you see when Reece pulls up, clearly she sees the cones that are parked in her space where she normally parks. And she sits there for a minute. Like she don't immediately get out and start moving cones. I don't know if she's on the phone talking to some people trying to fit, but it's clear like she's doing some math in her head about what is this cone doing in my parking space and how should I handle it, right? How should I deal with that situation? So you see, as soon as she gets out of the car, I don't know that she said anything to the guy who was just, if you look at it, he came from immediately off to her left on the same side that her driver's door was. When she got out, the first thing she did was move the cone, right? Not address the guy or anybody who was there to say, hey, what's going on? Why are these cones in my spot? You know, what's the reason why they're there? Because they may have been there for a good reason, right? They may have been there to protect her car, people coming through if there's some construction or something. I don't know why the cones were there. I don't think she knew why the cones were there. So the first thing she does is move the cone. So the guy comes immediately. As soon as she touches the cone, he immediately comes and begins to address the situation. So if I'm looking at that and I'm saying to myself, like, okay, what would be a better way to handle that to kind of avoid any type of potential conversation? It would have been perhaps to, instead of just go ahead and grab, and again, I'm not blaming Alicia. I'm just saying if we're quarterbacking this thing and saying what might have been a better way to avoid a confrontation, it would have been to ask him or ask somebody there, like, hey, this is my spot. What is this cone doing there? Because I need to park, right?
I want to go after that one. I don't agree with that one, Kevin. That dude came up and he was meeting with the great. When she came up, she moved the cone.
Yeah,
she turned her back. She turned her back.
Right.
He didn't say anything to her.
Tarris, you saw how he came that way. Why? After she had already moved the cone.
Right. She moved the cone.
We don't know how he would have come at her if he would have said, hey, if she would have approached him and said, hey,
right,
I'm Councilwoman Alicia Reece. This is where I usually park. What's going on?
Let me give another scenario. She moves the cone. She turns her back completely so she doesn't see him coming from her out back. And he doesn't say, hey, ma'am, can I address the situation? He just goes make a smart aleck and moves the cone and starts a conversation with her. Hold on, let me finish. Let me finish. We let you finish, Kevin, on that. I'm just trying to finish this thought in this conversation. She turns around, and after she turns around, he's moved the cone. He doesn't say, ma'am, we've got these out there. But he could have handled it with more interpersonal communication. She's the commissioner. I don't want to go as far as like thinking he should be fired now, but he could have handled it differently. He's a worker. He's the worker. He could have came and said, ma'am, I don't know what you got. We got to do this. He didn't have to go and grab that cone and put it back in front of her. And as soon as she turned back around, she saw him moving the cone. She didn't see, ma'am. Then that's why I said I wish I could hear the audio, because then you know who sparked it off. From that video I saw, that's that dude's fault. He sparked it off. He saw her, like you said, she sat there for a minute. He saw her sitting there. And then when she got out to go move the cone, he could have said, hey, ma'am, you can't move that cone. He went over and immediately, smart-aleckly, got the cone, put it right in front of her, and like when she turned around, she met with conversation.
We don't know what the dialogue is. I'm just trying to use a modicum of common sense and logic.
He ain't got none. That dude didn't have none.
I'm just asking you to use your common sense. Mm-hmm. You pull up on something anywhere, a parking space or anything, and there's a cone there. What are you thinking?
Okay, in front of my barbershop, if somebody came in front of my barbershop where I park every single day and someone had a cone and he's a worker, I'm moving the cone. And if he says something to me, man, here we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it, but I'm moving the cone. I'm moving that cone in front of my barbershop. I promise you that.
Let me ask you this, Nathan. You're at an event. You're taping and recording something. You got your equipment, your speakers, your mics or whatever set up. Somebody comes up. They don't say anything to you. They start moving your speakers and mics around. What are you going to do?
Well, I see this as different, but to answer your question directly, obviously I'm gonna let them know, like, hey, this is my stuff. What are you doing? Yada yada yada. But, but if I was in this situation though, Kevin, listen to you and Tarris. If I'm in this, and after you've seen the video there, I think that if I'm the worker and I see that situation, before I start getting all aggressive, I'm gonna go over to the person and ask them who they are and why they did that. And if that person tells me they're an elected official, okay, my bad, I'm gonna move the cone and keep it moving. That's what I'm gonna do.
And don't get me wrong.
Do we know why the cones were there in the first place?
I'm not defending what he said or
blaming Alicia Reece, bro.
No. I'm just simply saying, how could you? I'm just simply saying, I'm offering an alternative to how do you avoid these types of confrontations. That's all I'm doing. I'm not trying to blame Alicia
the onus
Reece.
was on him, though. Look, when you watch that video, when
no, it's not. Let me tell
you why, Kevin.
Look,
let me tell you why.
This is my point.
Can I tell you why, real quick?
If you pull up on established orange cones or barrels, most people. I'm just saying what most people do.
Is not most people, and that's where you're wrong.
Nathan, regardless of who you are, if you pull up on something that is a clear sign of construction, most people don't get out of their car and start moving barrels and
because most people are not the Hamilton County Commissioner who is used to parking there. If I was used to parking there, I might do the same thing because that's my privilege. But here's the point I want to make.
But you're gonna start moving cones and you don't even know why they're there.
Let me finish.
You're gonna start moving cones and you don't even know why they're there.
Yeah, I just answered. So when you look at that video, when Alicia gets out the car, dude is not in her eyesight. She gets out the car, she goes to the right. He comes from her left. I believe that if dude was standing right next to the cone, I believe that Alicia would have got out and she would have said something to him. But he wasn't standing there. So she just grabs the cone and starts moving them. I believe the onus was on him as the worker. If it's me, I would have asked her, like, well, why are you moving these cones? She would have said, I'm a Hamilton County Commissioner, I'm Alicia Reece. Okay, let me move the cone for you. Boom, it's over with.
Can I ask, do we even know why the cones were there in the first place?
That's what I'm saying. That's a great point, Raven. That's a great point.
It could have been construction, or it could have been the cones were there to hold the space for the Hamilton County Commissioners, which I believe it was.
The only reason
that I'm asking,
it was in the article.
The only reason why I'm asking is because as the owner of the car, I want to know if I park here, something gonna happen to my car if I park here, and that's kind of why I
parks here.
that's why I get what Kevin is saying a little bit. Like I don't know if I would have just jumped out and started moving stuff. I would have asked somebody some questions like, do you know why these are here? And if I
Sometimes,
park here, is something gonna happen to my car? Because I value my property more than I value this parking space.
I
Absolutely.
thought it was in
And
the article though.
Elisa driving a nice whip. I want to make
Right.
sure ain't nothing gonna come crashing down. This is what I'm saying about back up off of the emotion for a second and just think like what normal people do in normal situations. Normal people don't get out their car and
But
start
normal
moving
people are not a
corn
Hamilton
barrels
County
and cones.
commissioner.
They don't.
That's a terrible example. There's only three Hamilton County commissioners in all of Hamilton County. She's not a normal person. She is a person who is used to parking there as the Hamilton County commissioner. That
Nathan,
has to be a factor when we're
look,
talking about this. Again, look at
Nathan.
the video, Kevin. What you're going to see is
I've
that when
seen the
she
video
gets out
50
the
million
car,
times.
she gets out on the left-hand side and immediately goes to her right. The dude is on the left. She goes all the way around the car, picks up a cone, and is about to pick up another cone near the rear of the car before a dude comes from the left. She didn't see him. She did not see him. He saw her, though. And that's why I say, you're the construction worker. You see her. Why not just say something to her like, well, man, why are you moving these cones? I was told to put these here. She would have said whatever she said. And that should have been it.
But I think the issue, I get what you're saying as well, Nate, but I actually think the real issue resides in the conversation that was had once the moving had happened. Once she started moving or once he started moving, the real issue is the context of that conversation. If you see me moving these cones and I didn't ask you nothing, cool, whatever. But if you come and ask me, well, why are you moving the cones? And then I give you some reason. Oh, well, they're here because I'm saving this spot for who is designated for. And then I say to you, well, I'm County Commissioner Alioca Reece, and here's my credentials. And then you still come out of your mouth and say, well, I don't believe you, or I don't give a damn who you are. That's what. That's where it becomes an issue of, oh, you just disrespectful. Oh,
Right.
you have no respect.
Once
again,
she said
nobody's
she was a
defending
Hamilton
that.
County
Nobody's
commissioner,
defending
that should
that.
have been the end of it, Kevin.
In
Once
the
she
chat.
said,
Look in the
I'm
chat.
a Hamilton County commissioner, that should have been the end of it. Period.
Nathan, I'm not look, that's not, we're arguing two different points here. I was saying, hey, look, if we back this thing up, what are some ways that you can handle the situation where it don't even come to that confrontation? That's how I began.
I don't think that's realistic though, Kevin,
It can't
because
be
we're
two things
human. We
either.
are going to have different perspectives on different situations. So whether or not Alioca was the first one to say something, or whether or not he was the first one to say something, I don't really actually think that matters. I think what matters is the context of the conversation after it happens. If you see me moving these cones and you think that I'm not the person who's allowed to do so, you come have a conversation with me about why you think I'm not allowed to do so, and then I can tell you I am allowed to do so, or vice versa. If I see some cones in my designated parking spot and I don't think that they're supposed to be there, then maybe I do go talk to that person and ask them, well, why are these cones in my parking spot? Either way it go, there is a conversation to be had that just was not had because respect was not established. And that's the issue.
And from the tone that Alicia had from her
this is
interview.
kind of my point there, Raven. I agree with exactly what you said. So it's a matter of perspective on who was the first one to violate the respect factor. The person who jumps out the car, who I don't know, who's moving around my stuff without talking.
But it's not his stuff though. He's a city employee. Those cones don't belong to him. So this has no personal effect on him.
I think that was part of the story, is that those were the cones that belonged to the company that was doing the work there. That's part of the story. That's why I made the analogy to Nathan's equipment. It did belong. I believe the reporting said that the cones belonged to the company that was doing the work.
That makes a difference.
So again, this is where perspective matters. If somebody get out and start moving your stuff and you don't know who they is, I feel like I'm disrespected because what you doing moving my stuff around? I'm going to say something to you. I'm going to go back and get my stuff. Right?
Well,
who violated respect first? The person.
But I don't know if you can consider that disrespectful. I am county, like they said, I'm county commissioner. I park here all the time.
Yeah, but I don't know that, Raven. I don't know you. You somebody that just pulled up and started moving.
And that's fine. That's fine. But even if you don't know that, again, you could have just as easily chosen to meet me with respect in that moment. You don't have to know who I am, but you
But
know
if
how
I
you
feel
find out
I've
who
been
I am? You
disrespected,
have a respectful
if
conversation
I
with me
feel
and
like I've
ask me
been
who I
disrespected
am.
first, if I feel like I've been disrespected first, what are the
But
chances?
why is that seen as
If
disrespect?
you feel like you've been disrespected, Raven, what is your odds of meeting that disrespect with respect?
I don't, but I mean, I get the point that if somebody is blatantly disrespecting me, if somebody is blatant in that disrespect, then cool. If I feel like you might have done something unintentionally, I'm not just gonna fire off at you. I'm gonna ask some questions first.
Again, look, I'm not. Here's all that I'm saying is, and this is what I say. This is the part about just going back and objectively trying to look at situations and say, hey, look, I'm not going to disagree with you and say that what dude said was disrespectful, out of line, out of pocket. He shouldn't have been removed for what he did, that you don't speak to a woman that way. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying when you look at how events escalate to certain places, they begin somewhere. And so we should have a duty to not just be mad about situations, but to look back and say, how could this have turned out to be a different situation?
I got an answer for you too.
And end up with a different result.
I got a question.
I want to answer your question.
I got a
The
question
more
too.
I hear you guys talk, the more I'm starting to realize who I blame in this situation. And that's the parent company of whatever this construction company is, because it's clear they had the wrong person in the wrong position. Clearly, this dude did not have enough information, right? I'm sure at this point, there's been a lot of communication about cones and who people are. They should have had all these conversations so that individual could have had more information.
Yeah.
Plus, they needed somebody with a better disposition. Like, you can't put everybody in every position, right? Clearly, his disposition, and he didn't have enough information. So for him to make the right professional decision is the real culprit in all of this. I blame the parent company.
I got a question.
Absolutely.
I got a question.
Absolutely.
I got a question. Well, okay. So it took me so long to get this question in here.
I'm sorry about that, bro. Go ahead. You know how it is.
So how come she's able to use this situation to prop up what's going on the federal level? This is nothing federal. But the initial rollout to her statement to us having this conversation was, I think since Donald Trump, I'm paraphrasing, of course, since Donald Trump is president and the way things are coming down on the federal level, it's not going to stop. And I was like, yeah, until we saw the stuff. That's a unwarranted use of outrage, scaremongering. All since big old Donald Trump, ever since Donald Trump got in office, now I got some white dude out here telling me I can't park. You know what I'm saying? We cannot. That says black people. I would not like to see us go there either. I was all for it. I was like all for it. I was like, yeah, man, yeah. And I'm for as an elected official, and as for somebody parking in my parking spot and putting a cone in front of a place where I usually park. I would be like, I would do the same thing Alicia did, and but her using that as a platform to take a stab at national politics, I don't agree with.
I think that's a fair observation. And I think Kevin spoke to that. I think he spoke very eloquently about, how people have certain lenses, so we don't have to go over it. But I think that's fair for you to say that. I think that's fair.
I don't disagree.
Just like I think it's fair for somebody said that Alicia lied when she said that the dude smacked the cone out. I think for people to call that out is completely fair, because the video,
it is.
The video
and here's what I would say, and here's what I would say, is that one might say that if she embellished on that point, which the video very clearly showed it didn't, it draws into question whether or not you can trust the rest of her story. Okay, so, and I'm not saying she's not telling the truth. I know it sounds like I'm waffling, but I'm trying to be as objective as I can be here to say,
no, I hear you,
bro.
If
you're gonna say at a council meeting, dude snatched the cone out of my hand. Snatched, I think was smack, whatever it was. She indicated that there was some sort of physical altercation there with the cone. Clearly, the video does not show that. We can't hear the audio of what was said between the two. But if you're gonna say the dude snatched the cone out of your hand and I can look and see clearly he didn't, well, that does make me say, how do I know the rest of what you're telling me is straight up? And that would be a
fair as
fair
well.
and reasonable critique for anybody who wanted to say that about
Yeah,
that.
that is
situation.
fair. That is
I
fair.
feel like it's been a while since we heard from Phil. Phil, how do you feel?
Yeah, sometimes I feel very lonely. So thank you, Raven. Actually, in listening to this, Kevin has convinced me. I think he is right in that it has nothing to do with whether she's a county commissioner or whatever. When you see cones, you at least, I think, have a duty to kind of try to explore, what are these doing here? Because we all know that when cones are put down, it usually means that there's some construction going on and it frankly wouldn't be safe to park there. And so I think he makes a very good point that I think she was perhaps a little arrogant in not in just moving the cones. And I disagree with all due respect with Nathan. Oh, she's a county commissioner. She can do that. No, that doesn't give her the right to do that. These guys are there doing some kind of hopefully legitimate construction. They've indicated through those cones that it's not, that we don't want you to park here. Okay. I think it was fine if she got out and tried to ask somebody what's going on here. But other than that, I think the right thing to do is just to assume, hey, for today, I can't use my parking space. I'll have to park like any other person in some
You know what?
lot
Look at
somewhere.
you. Look at you. Stop it, Phil. You know darn well back when you was an elected official, you was walking through these streets, stomping your cowboy boots with your chest all out, parking where you want to park. You was kicking cones out the way.
Really?
You was putting yourself first in
All right,
line at the
I got a
restaurant.
response
Stop
to
it,
that.
Phil.
Excuse me. I recall, I don't remember the name of the person, but there was somebody who was interviewing me, when I was on city council. I can't remember who it was, but somebody who said that he and his partner were going to really get on me and all this. And at the end, if I recall, this person said that I was relatively respectful. So
yeah, you walked out of there.
And I do have one anecdote that I don't think has anything to do with this, but I used to drive this I think it was a bright yellow Miata or something like that, and I had my parking space was in front of City Hall. We have a couple
your parking
spaces
space,
there.
huh? Look at you, elitist, all arrogant. Look at you.
4 city council members, pal. What do you want? Okay, so I remember parking there one time, and I came out, and somebody had ripped off all of my whatever we used then. No, I don't think it was CDs. I hate to say, what is it? Cartridge? What do you call those things? Cassette tapes. I think that kind of thing. And this reporter interviewed me, and I brought up my Herman's Hermits thing, and I said, what really bugs me is that he took my whole Hermits collection. So anyway, that's my experience with parking as far as elected officials
Sometimes
go.
they land, sometimes they don't.
Nathan, I think what this illustrates though is the point, and I think Raven kind of said this, and I didn't disagree with it. I mean, I think in many ways, it makes both of our cases in that a lot of this stuff is a matter of perspective. I see cones, I see a problem. I see construction, I'm going to ask somebody about it. I'm not just going to start moving cones and parking. That's me. That's who I am. I'm not going to do that. Clearly, that's not Alicia Reece. Whether it's my parking space or not, that's just how I am. And so how I am governs how I would have handled that situation.
If that's your parking space, you telling me this is your parking space, and you see
because
cones,
Nathan, I'm gonna.
You're not gonna move the cones, Kevin. Please,
no, because I'm gonna assume, Nathan,
you moving them cones,
I'm gonna
bro.
assume because look, I operate maybe from a different premise as you. If I pull into something, and if I got a regular parking space in my job, which I don't, unfortunately, I'm not that privileged. But if I did, and I pulled up, and there was a cone or something, tape, anything blocking me from getting into my parking space, I am going to assume that there's probably a pretty good reason why that's the case. And so I'm not just going to move it and pull in that parking space for all of the reasons that Raven said. I value my car. I don't want my car towed. I don't want my car damaged. I don't want anything that's going to happen to my car. So before I pull into something strange that don't look like it normally look, I'm going to ask about it. And for all of you folks who just run headlong into situations that you don't know nothing about, God bless you. I hope it work out for you.
I don't believe
But
it
that
one
ain't
bit.
me.
I ain't gonna lie.
I
It
don't believe
depends
it
on
one
what
bit.
day it is. It depends on what day it is for me. Some days I don't mind a little confrontation, and some days I just don't want to deal with it. So if it's a day that I don't want to deal with it, I'm just gonna find somewhere else to park. But if it's a day where we in it now. This is a confrontational kind of day. These cones are in my spot. I don't see any reason why they should be there. I'm probably gonna get out and do what Alicia did, but
But
typically
that's the thing though, Raven.
I do lean on the side of caution first. So I
Yeah,
might ask some questions normally, but if it's just
Yeah,
one of them kind
okay,
of days,
y'all different from
let
it
me.
me
is
ask
what
you.
it
Let me ask
is.
you
Y'all
this,
different
Raven.
from
Let me
me.
ask you this.
I'm moving.
You said something exactly perfect. You don't see a reason why it's there. You don't see, but that don't mean that there's not a good reason why
You're
it's
not
there.
wrong, but it's like I said, it just depends on what kind of day I'm having. I'm
Okay,
not
so
gonna lie
don't you
about
think
that.
you have an obligation to find out what that reason is before? What if
Kevin,
they had
You
just
know
got
what?
done? What if they
I
had just got
don't
done
believe
pouring
it.
concrete on your space and you couldn't tell,
Not
but
even
you
pouring
roll
concrete.
your car up on there. You
Now
roll
we
your
pouring
car up
But
concrete.
on
I feel
there.
like, but see, I know what it looks like when they just got done pouring
Okay,
concrete, and
but hey,
typically it's more than just a
it can
couple of
look
cones
good. You
there.
know, sometimes that blacktop look good, but it still ain't set all the way. You know, it takes a little bit of time for that stuff to get. I'm just using an example. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that just because you don't see the good reason, don't mean that there ain't one. And
Yes.
we have
You're not
you
wrong.
as a responsible person, you should have, because if it
Cap,
was you,
cap.
you wouldn't
But
want
let me ask you
anybody
this
doing
question,
it
then,
for
Kevin. Let me
you.
ask you this question: if this is a designated spot that I have been given by my position in the city, is it not on the city to then notify me on the day that I'm having a commissioners meeting? Is it then not on the
Sure.
city to
So that's
notify
so
me
that's
that there's
so
something
that's
going on with my spot?
So that's another conversation about who's to blame, which is where I go back to kind of what Nathan was saying. Is maybe there should have been clearer signage. Maybe you have better people out there. There's a lot of blame to go around in this situation. But I guess the way that I operate from is when I don't know information, and again, this is just me, and again, everybody is different. When I don't know information, I don't assume. I try to find out. And maybe that's the reporter in me that is always asking questions and trying to get answers. And maybe that's just how I'm wired, and everybody ain't wired that way. But to
I
me,
can
when I
respect
see
that.
things that are strange or out of order, I'm going to ask about it, right? And find out whether there's a good reason or not. And if there's not a good reason, then I might battle. I
I
might
hear you,
battle if I
bro.
feel like what you telling me don't sound right or it ain't working.
I hear you, bro, but I'm calling cap because if you got your own parking space and
Phil is
you
so
roll up
confused.
and you roll up to your parking space and somebody got some cones there, you getting out that car, kicking them cones and parking that car just like me and everybody else. Stop it. Alicia Reece, the real issue I think is with the company, the construction company, but a good conversation nonetheless. One more topic. One more topic. Let's talk about PG Sinfield. Appeals court uphills his conviction. Now, this is such an interesting turn of events. I think a lot of people that follow local politics will agree when I say that he had a legitimate, a very strong likelihood of being elected mayor of Cincinnati. And then he got caught on a series of essentially like wiretaps videos in which he was ultimately convicted for essentially selling his vote for a local development deal. As I understand it, PG Sinfield is out on appeal or right now. I don't know what this means. This might mean he ends up going back to prison. But I want to get your thoughts on this story about PG Sinfield and city council and corruption, Gang of Five.
Well, I've always been kind of troubled by that case because the money didn't go into his pocket. Remember the other two bribery cases from city council? That was clear bribes. It wasn't a campaign contribution. I think to me, frankly, every politician who runs for office, uh, they meet with the special interests, and okay, they aren't quite as direct as he was in that, and that was a mistake on his part, and probably some arrogance on his part. But to me, I mean, most politicians do in that situation is they listen to what the person wants, and they say, "Well, I definitely agree with you on that point. I'm definitely going to work on that," and blah blah blah, and then they give him a contribution. Uh, like I said, he was a little bit more blunt, and that was his mistake. But I'm troubled by this case. I have been from the beginning, just because it was money to a campaign committee, and what he did, and everybody does it. So I have some. I've always had questions about that case, whether or not it was affirmed as it was on
What does this
appeal.
mean now? Does it mean he goes? He has to go to prison and serve out his term, or what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, here's what it means. Well, first of all, it depends. He went to prison for some period, and then they let him out on what they call appeal bond, meaning you're appealing, so you can get out until your appeal's been heard. Now his appeal has been heard. The only way he stays out of jail now is if he files an appeal to, I guess this is federal, right? So if he files an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. If they accept the case, then he could stay out. Other than that, he's got to
I
go
wonder if
back
we're
to
going to see
jail.
PG Sittenfeld appeal to Donald Trump like everybody else is that has some
Good
kind of
luck
trouble,
with that.
like Eric Adams up in New York. Like, is that the next move?
That Eric Adams thing makes me sick. You know what he did? He went
He
down
kissed
to
the
Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring, and also, he was kind of an anti-immigration guy. I have no doubt that he told Trump that if you need any help catching illegals in New York City, I'll be there for you. But this is the way Trump works. This is not justice. This is just a transaction to him. But this is what erodes our belief in the rule of law.
Anybody has thoughts on PG Sittenfeld? What happens
Yeah,
next?
I want to weigh in. I want to weigh in as an elected
right ahead,
official. I mean, as an elected official, every day I am concerned with breaking the law. I do not want to break the law, man. I'm not taking no money.
Are you saying, Tarris? Excuse me. You saying you don't
I'm not
accept
taking
bribes?
to this day as an elected official. I have not received. I have not
I'm
received
teasing. All right, go ahead.
one penny
Continue.
of any kind of. Well, I'm
right.
sorry. I've received nothing over $100 from somebody. I've been nothing that like a PAC money, and I never will. And I'm courted by several PACs. Several PACs that I believe in. But I from watching Pastor and Sittenfeld and all these, because I thought that was a witch hunt, because I thought he was on a trajectory path to be the next mayor, and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 and then AFTAP comes in. So I I watch Cincinnati politics from with binoculars, because I'm trying to learn from mistakes, from when I see these people go through that stuff. Like, first, I've said, when I get in this politics, I'm not taking money from nobody. And whenever I do get to that point to where I'm taking money from that, it's got to go through my campaign chair, finance. I'm not touching any of that kind of stuff, because that's the bottom line. If you don't break the law and you don't get involved in this kind of stuff, you don't have to worry about it. So that's the forever angle I'm going to take. And if anybody's ever watching my political career, a child or somebody younger who's an aspiring politician, my thing is, don't take no money from anybody, especially when they start. Just don't take coffee. Don't let them pay for coffee. Don't anything. Pay your own way, and then you can talk your own crap, and then all that stuff.
If I could just share, I didn't even talk too much. An anecdote where I kind of agree with Tarris is, I was always, not out of that I have such great ethics, but frankly, because I wanted to save my career. Why politicians do a lot of stuff they do, whether it's with a hooker or whatever the heck it is. I mean, it's like you're risking your whole life and your family. I remember a time when I had some fundraiser and I had to get to Columbus. And again, nothing bad here, but Bob Castellini, I think it was, let me in and somebody else at the event. He flew us up to Columbus, but I made a point of, even though it sounds kind of silly, but I made a point of finding out what the market rate was for airfare between the two cities, and I sent him a check. And again, he wasn't trying to do anything improper. He was in no way, but I was just always extra cautious about those kind of
Phil,
things.
I agree with you, man. And thanks for backing that up, because that makes that's a good reinforcement for somebody who's in politics to make sure, because campaign finance is where they usually get most people when it comes to politics. They usually get you into the campaign finance, and they set it up every way for you to succeed and not get in trouble. That's why I don't understand how, like you said, some of these politicians just just get greedy, or those are the people I don't understand. I just don't get it.
Well,
I mean, look at Elliot Spitzer and others, and Elliot Spitzer, maybe some others. I mean, the guy threw away. He was a pretty smart guy. He threw away his whole career for one night with a prostitute. It just seems. It boggles my mind. I gotta say, ask you, Tarris, though, do you agree with what I said about the Sittenfeld case, in that does it concern you as it does me that this was not money that he took, it went into his pocket? It
Yeah,
was campaign
that
contributions.
concerns me an awful lot, because PACs approach state senators, state representatives all the time to want to do work with them, and I could see where PJ could get involved with, oh, don't give it to me. I work with this PAC over there. Talk to them, and then the money go to them. I mean, I could see where that could. Yeah. That's so easy to do. So that's what scares me about this whole situation, and why I won't work with PACs. And because that's what you just said feels too easy.
Here's what you got to look at. You got to look at the appellate judge's language in what he said about rejecting PG Sittenfeld's appeal. He pretty much said that it was close.
It was 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
Just for the, yeah. There's one
right.
dissenting.
That the argument was this was close, that the lines were very blurry between what PG did and what he was accused of doing. And if you kind of read between the language a little bit, you almost seem to suggest that the judges said that if it had been left up to them, that they might not have seen, the lines might have been blurred enough that Sittenfeld might have gotten his appeal. But what they leaned on is that a jury of his peers, found him guilty of corruption and taking bribes, and that the precedent has been for courts to stick with the sides of what jury resolutions have done. That while this was close, this is what the jury saw, and it was so close that it's not enough for us to overturn what the jury said. So to your point about the concerns about this going to a PAC and all of that, a lot of this stuff is in a gray area, which is why so many people, there were so many groups politically that were actually arguing on the side of Sittenfeld, because a lot of politicians are looking at this and saying, well, if they got him on this, that makes a whole lot of us potentially susceptible to the same type of crimes that Sittenfeld did. So there were a lot of people who were pulling for Sittenfeld to win this on appeal for that very reason. And so the fact that he didn't, though, I think should be a cause for concern for every politician out there. And you better make sure you're buttoned up. Now, we'll say, PG is smarter than what he showed in this particular case. I mean, the fact that he could not read through the setup. I mean, he met with a guy, he met with an Italian guy named Vinny, for God's sake. I mean, if it doesn't get any more stereotypical in the setup than that.
Wait a minute. Is that anti-DEI?
Hey, man, look, I'm just going, and the only reason why I bring it up is because
Italian guy named Vinny. I know a lot of good Italian guys named Vinny.
If you listen to some of the tape recordings, even PG's ridiculous meter went off, because he even asked the guy. I remember it. Like that even set off a little red flag for him, but he wasn't smart enough to get off the train then. And so, it's unfortunate. I mean, he probably had a great political career in front of him. He got a little bit too greedy, and unfortunately, he took the cheese.
Raven, your thoughts?
This whole case has kind of been like, this whole Gang of Five thing was kind of like my introduction to understanding some of the ways that city council works, because there were a lot of things that I didn't know before this case about how money is handled, and about how they cut certain deals with these different people, and they come to them, they ask them to do certain things with their votes. So this was really a learning experience for me. I do think that it is interesting that he was convicted by a jury of his peers. I think that's very telling. I think that's very interesting. But it also kind of, if I'm being honest, I kind of don't feel bad for the guy, because as somebody who is a voter, as somebody who does kind of hold my elected officials to a moral standard, it kind of cleans house. It kind of, I think it supports what people want to see in the politicians they put in positions of power. I want to make sure that you're there for the right reasons, and if your reasoning for being here is for you to make some money over doing things that you actually think are effective and useful to the community, you gotta go, and you have to be held accountable for your actions. I think that it has required a lot of other council members to kind of tighten up and kind of really look at the things that they're doing and the decisions that they're making, and being sure that if I decide to support this thing, or if I decide to lend my vote to this thing, that it is for the right reasons and not because I expect to get some kind of kickback off of it. And so I think that it's unfortunate. I think that he might have had some good intentions for the city and in that position, but I think that, like Kevin said, you got too greedy. You kind of overplayed your hand. You got in trouble, and you gonna have to deal with the consequences.
Oh yeah, 1,000%. You know, my motto goes for any and all family, friends. You do the crime, you got to do the time,
Gotta do
buddy. Now, it doesn't mean that I won't have sympathy for you. I might write a letter to the judge for you, as I did for PG Sittenfield. I might put some money on your books, but at the end of the day, buddy, you cook that up, so you got to deal with it. And you know, I agree with the point that as I watched the case, I was like, "How you falling for this?" I was giving you a little hard time, but I'm like, Vinny, the stereotypical Vinny. Like if you sit back and I did at the times I was doing the show, and you know, I was talking about this stuff every day. So I watched all the videos, like all the stuff that Cincinnati.com was putting out, I was checking out. And it just seems so obvious to me. Like, this is obviously a setup, bruh. Like, and it just still to this day, I can't understand like how somebody can fall for that. But I think back to the A word, arrogance. Sometimes you can get so caught up with yourself that,
I
you know,
also think that it has something to do with him being, again, hate to take it there, Phil, but I think it has something to do with him being a white male.
well, absolutely on some case, no doubt.
You move through the world, and especially spaces that where you conduct business with a certain level of entitlement, a certain level of, just arrogance in the way that you think about things, and you think that ain't nobody really checking for you because you are experiencing a level of privilege that comes with certain safeties, that when you do things, you can assume that people are not going to hold you as accountable as they might hold your other counterparts who don't look like you.
Yeah. How about the other two? How about the other two bribery cases? Those are African
Absolutely.
Americans, pastor, and
And
I
they
forget the
and they
other.
got
Okay,
convicted and they
so
went to
so
jail.
what about them? Did they feel arrogant because of their
No,
I
race?
they
think it.
feel arrogant because of the access to the opportunities that they received. It had nothing to do with race, and that.
For you to assume that because PG Sittenfeld did that, it's because he's white. I think that's
That's not what
a
she
bit of
said
a
though,
That's
Phil.
not
Yeah,
what I
no,
said, though,
I think
Phil.
what she was talking about, maybe Phil, was sort of like a sense of entitlement, which I think PG definitely had. I think he did have a sense of entitlement, but I also think that there was a culture of corruption that was existing in Cincinnati government at that particular time, that said to PG, that said to Greg Pastor or Jeff Pastor, that said to Tamaya Denard, that we can get this off because maybe they've seen other people get it off and not get caught. Let's not get twisted. The feds were looking into Cincinnati government because the rap was out that there were folks who were getting favors and that there was some quid pro quo going on. Now, you know, they may have came in looking for certain big fish that they weren't able to get or that they weren't able to net. But in the midst of that, they caught some smaller fish and a potential big fish, you know, like I said, who were willing to take the cheese that maybe some other folks that they were looking at wouldn't take. And so there was clearly a belief, at least on the federal level, that there was a culture of corruption that existed in Cincinnati that made people think they could get this off and not get caught.
Yeah, but I don't have a problem with that. But what Raven was saying was it somehow had to do with race. Why PG Sittenfeld, expected that he could do this without any consequences. I mean, I don't know how you draw a racial
Because I'm Black in
conclusion
America,
from
and I
that.
know that I moved through this country in certain instances, very painfully aware of my race and my gender, because those things are intersectional and they definitely affect my experience when it comes to certain things. Whereas a white straight male moves through the world in a very different way than I do, and that sometimes plays into the decisions that they make. That's all I meant, Phil.
And
Insert
she's right.
Lamar, they are not like us. Insert they not like us, they not like us. That would have been a perfect like.
Tarris, That's very good. You seem to have some
A little
musical
What?
ability.
What?
That's impressive.
Huh? That's
Let me
almost an
share
insult,
one
Tarris.
conversation I had with. Don't let them put you down, Tarris. You got what it takes. Believe me, I can tell.
Blindside.
In fact, it wouldn't surprise me a couple years from now if we see our friend Tarris out in that Super Bowl halftime show. From what I just heard, anyway.
Oh, he got all the
But
jokes.
let me tell you, this may be me taking an unusual side here, but I remember a conversation and I had with a couple FBI guys in Cincinnati when I was on city council. I know this starts out sounding not good, but it's okay. I was kind of known at city council as the guy who always exposed the waste. Okay, the waste, and maybe you could even say corruption. But there was a housing program called Genesis that I kind of blew the lid off. I investigated and blah, blah, blah. And so I was known. So one time, and I don't hold it against them, a couple of these FBI guys came to me and said, hey, listen, we're interested in corruption law. Will you, kind of work with us? And I said, sure, no problem. But they did make one comment that kind of concerned me a little bit. They said, our boss says that there's got to be some corruption. You got to go ahead and find it. And again, it was just one comment, but it was a little concerning to me because it was almost like our boss says we got to find this, and so we better. And maybe I'm making too much of it, but that kind of bothered me a little bit. And I do think there are situations with law enforcement where pressure can be brought. The worst case was that, I don't know if you remember the Fisher Homes thing, where they did this raid on all these at the Henry Fisher Company, and it was all BS, trying to get immigrants and stuff. So I think we always have to be careful that that law enforcement will always have a tendency to kind of step over the line.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point, and not just talking about this in city government. And to bring it back to Raven's point about race, I think that that's definitely one of the things that one of the talking points that often gets trumpeted is how aggressive police are, law enforcement are, in going after certain communities and certain organizations and certain types of people under the belief that there's got to be something wrong. So we've got to find it. We've got to get informants. We've got to be extra aggressive. And I think we always need to be holding them accountable for not doing that types of things, but certainly, showing up when it's necessary, because people can use that for certain political purposes. And there are many who would argue that, there are some who wanted PG kind of out of the way, in the mayor and Democratic race for the city. And so some of his proponents have argued that this was a bit of a political hit, against him. But you raise a good, fair point, Phil, that not just in instances of where we're talking about corruption in city government, but in a lot of other places, we need to make sure that law enforcement is always doing the right things in terms of how they're going after folks.
I want to piggyback on something that Raven said too, like when it comes to race. Often when Black men and Black women bring up how we feel about how white men act, and then like Phil, not to single you out, but it's like, oh no, we don't act like that. We're like, well, why do you think that we're saying that you act that way? And then it goes back to my argument that I'll always make, that whenever it comes time for the white men and women to do the right thing, I don't trust that they will, because when we try to articulate how they act in our vantage point of our view, like Raven just said, from her own experience, and see how white men go across this world and just think that they can do anything and get away with everything, and then feel, not to single you out again, you're like, oh no, that's not how we do things. But actually, that's how you do. So when we get to situations where, like, I'm not a proponent of DEI or affirmative action, but when they can raise the argument to say, when white men get into the room, instead of using terms like DEI and affirmative action, that's when they say, oh, we don't have to do anything for Black people. We can just give it to our white cousin or our white sister or our white, this is the introduction, those slights, whenever we say, and that's where I say, not you feel particularly, but white men, 30 to 60-year-old, whenever you guys are getting put in positions where you can exalt a black person and who deserves it, or give it to that these are situations where when we get blown off, when we articulate how you act and you blow us off. This is the root of it, in my opinion.
Well, and I think that's why discussions like these or what we have are good. Because, you can look at any one of these topics that we talk about and everybody comes at it from a different perspective, a lot of times. Different experience, different ways of seeing the world, communicating the world. And that's why I think that, it's important for all of us to listen and try to understand the perspectives that people are bringing to the table. Not because you necessarily got to agree with it or co-sign with what people say, but it helps you get a better understanding of the world around you and how you see and how some behaviors and things can be explained to you a little bit better. But it's like, if you're always closed off and it's just your perspective or nothing, then you are shutting yourself off to a large percentage of the world, and things are never going to make sense to you. And you'll be perpetually frustrated by what you're dealing with. So, that's the goal behind, why we wanted to try to do Hot Mic, was to try to bring diverse perspectives, different perspectives, so people can hear things more than just singing to the choir, because that's what's wrong with our country right now. It's like everybody is in their silo, in their echo chamber, and they're hearing things exactly the way that they want to hear it from people who agree with them 100%. And that's not good. That's not good, because it doesn't challenge us to ever look at the fact that we might be wrong. And sometimes we are wrong. Nathan, I will even go back and admit that in the conversation that we were having about immigration a couple podcasts ago, where you were talking about from a moral perspective, kind of how you disagree with it, and I was listening to and watching some stuff. Didn't even have anything to do with immigration, but it was just more about moral laws being higher than certain moral laws being higher than earthly laws. And that we have to be reminded that there are moral laws that supersede whatever the laws might be on the books, right? And so I felt you in that regard, where even though we didn't 100% agree in terms of what we were talking about, that was kind of a point that you were arguing in how you saw sort of this breaking up of families and doing all of that type stuff. And so definitely made me reconsider my position on that. Thinking about it after the podcast, coming into some more information is a little different than maybe how I was looking at that. And so that's the positive of trying to listen to perspectives that are different. And you got to be open to the fact that sometimes, as strongly as you might feel, you could be wrong.
Can I jump on to what you just said one more time with the immigration thing, because it fits perfectly in there. Trump got rid of, he's saying we're going to get rid of mass deportation. I kept saying he's going to mass deportation. And now he's signed an executive order that's allowing South Africans who look like Elon Musk, saying they're being DI'd again, they're being oppressed, so we're going to make asylum and make room for them. So that's no different than what the whole situation we just went through when Raven said, yeah, this is how PJ Fettenfeld probably came across life, because he's white male and he thought he would be able to get away with these things. And that's why he went through that. And then Phil was like, oh no, that probably isn't a good thing. Why was everything got to be around race? Then we got Donald Trump saying he's going to immigrate. We got to get deport brown and brown people. Then he makes provisions for these South Americans or South Africans that look like Elon Musk. It kind of looks like Elon Musk is doing all this stuff to bring these immigrants over that he's going to make provisions for. And I'm not saying he's a president of the United States, but that's the whole gist of white supremacy. That is just, I'll never agree with it, but that's the type of subtle, is it covert or subtle white supremacy that the Democrats, I think, should be more aware of than and focus in more on, because than the other part.
Yeah, only thing I disagree with you on is it wasn't, that move was not subtle. That was nothing subtle about it at all. Does anybody have anything they want to say before you roll out? Speak now.
I do. believed, and I've said this on the show, that whereas 30 or 40 or more years ago, I felt that the back then, that whereas the greatest division or inequities had to do with race, I believe that today it's less race and it's more economic, the disappearing middle class. And I've said I don't support. I think there have been some excesses in the whole DEI situation. And I've used a few examples from city council, but I will say that listening to all of you on this podcast over the last couple of months, as well as some relationships I have that are important to me, have shown me something, which is that I have to admit I have not met one Black person who hasn't been impacted by racism. Okay. And in other words, from what they and you and they have said to me. And so it's not that I'm changing my beliefs about certain things, but I just want to, and I'm thanking all of you. I have become more sensitive to this, both from some friends of mine and through being with you on this
That's all right.
podcast.
I
Love it.
love, I love to hear that, Phil. And I also
You
want,
made me cry.
I also want you to know that, like, there's no anger or no contention there with you expressing how you feel when I say the things that I say, because that's what fosters and facilitates the kind of conversations that do get us to a point where we can
Yeah.
reach a point of understanding amongst each other. I don't know if I'm being honest, and I choose to be on this platform, I don't really have very many conversations with white men on a day-to-day basis. So when I get to come to this platform,
Oh, I do all the time.
when I get to be on this platform and have conversations with you and with Kevin Gordon, and I'm saying this is like, it's not only enriching for you to hear our experiences, but it's also enriching for me to understand the way that your mind works, because there's no part of me that feels that you are a white supremacist or a racist or any of those things. I have none of those beliefs about you at all. What I do feel, though,
Thank
is
you.
that sometimes you might just have a little bit of a blind spot to certain things that I might experience because you don't have my same life experience. And so when I say certain things, I want you to challenge me if you feel like that's not the truth, because then we can have a conversation about our different experiences, and we can meet in the middle and get to a point where we can understand each other better. So whenever you hear stuff like that, I'm not saying that Phil is a white supremacist or a racist or like, I'm not saying any of those things. I'm simply just sharing my experience.
I've been called worse things. Thank you.
I
I
got one more
appreciate that,
final thing
Ray. That means a
before we
lot,
go.
seriously.
If the Republican Party of Hamilton County jumps on this civil rights things and leaves you Democrats in the dust, I'm gonna laugh.
Yeah, we'll be laughing together on that, Tarris, because that will be that will be a sight to see on that, brother. We will wait to see that.
The play is there. The vice president is from Cincinnati. If you guys don't go for this play, I don't know what to tell you. The vice president is from Cincinnati, and his half brother is challenging the current Democrat mayor. If y'all don't get on y'all's horse, okay.
I don't even need
just like Kamala Harris was going to lose.
To predict that, Tarris, he's going to lose badly.
Just like Kamala Harris was going to lose. Just like Kamala Harris was going to lose.
He might not even make it out of the Republican primary for that position. But and also, you might have missed this, but Donald Trump refused to endorse your boy for 2028. While you out here talking about J.D. Vance, the ringmaster done already Gollum done already said, hey man, he ain't giving up the pressures. You know what I'm saying? J.D. Vance can't get his endorsement.
And you know the only person
which is crazy, by the way.
The only person who cares about that is the Democratic Party, because the Republican Party, we have our own agenda. We have our own agenda. So Donald Trump's got about, how many days has he been in office? He's been in office about 70 days or about 30 days. He's got about 70 more days. He's got about 70 more days.
Hey, listen, the Republican Party better be concerned about MAGA, because y'all done so married yourself to MAGA that the Republican Party don't stand a chance without MAGA. So you better
let the Democrats say that.
Care about what the orange man got to say. You know what I'm saying?
If we lose MAGA, it's okay, because we got blacks and Latinos now. So we don't need MAGA.
That's very quickly changing. That's very quickly changing. So don't bank on that.
The exit polls don't lie. Exit polls don't lie.
I detect.
We shall see.
See, Tarris, I'm gonna let this be my closing comment. See, brother, I had kept the lash off of you today on this podcast because I've been the one. Normally it's you taking the beating in the comments, but today I was blocking for you because
I appreciate that.
I took a pretty good beating today in
saw
the
that.
comments, which is okay. We all get our turn. We all get our turn in the comments, which is good. But I helped you out today. Now, brother, go on out with that because you about to get yourself back over in the comments before we close out.
Hey, listen, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. To the audience, please lift us up with a share and a like. Tell people about the podcast. And we are planning to be back on Friday at 1 p.m. for more Hot Mics. So have a great rest of your Tuesday, a great week, and we'll be talking with you real soon.
All right, see you guys.
Thank you.